you can get on now, then I can let you in and we can figure out the sharing before I let everybody else in. There's quite a few people in the waiting room.
So, don't sing, dance, don't fall. Don't zag, have you eat with me? Not much rather be. Everything you take. I'd like to.
Hi, can you get in the waiting room just so that I can figure out the sharing and then I can let everybody in so they're not waiting for like eight.
I'm actually just waiting for you whenever.
You're waiting for me, but I can't see you in the waiting room.
It says host is joined.
Oh, there you are. Okay, I'm letting you in. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, bye. Okay, so if I make you host, this is usually how Thomas and I do it.
Okay.
If I make you the host, then you share, like I request to share, but then you can watch and let people in the waiting room. Because when I start teaching, like I've had it where people can't get in and I don't see and it's a mess. So that's what we started doing.
And then
So I just made you the host and then I'll send you a share, I'll request to share.
do you want me to help you with keywords or
Sorry, what?
do you need help with keywords? Just reminders occasionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if you can watch the chat too.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm gonna
Okay.
start letting people in now. That's okay.
Okay, let me pause my music. Okay, and turn off my phone. That's another thing. People will like be texting me to let them in and then I can't see it, so or I don't see it. Okay. Um Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me. We've got about 4 more minutes before 10 o'clock, so we'll wait until 10 to start. Hi, John. Thanks for waving at me. Let me know you, you can hear me. Okay, this is the fun one. 3 hours, you guys. We'll take, well, I'll wait till 10 and then I'll tell you kind of how we're going to roll. Okay, good morning. There's a few people in the chat that said they can't hear anything. Hopefully, now that I'm actually talking, you can hear something. If sometimes if you can't hear something and everybody else can, you just need to log out and log back in, and that'll fix it. But hopefully everybody can hear. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. This is the 2025. Maybe I should update my slide. Okay, this is the 2020, it's 2026. 2026 mandatory residential. Okay. I just went in today and went over the newsletter. Hopefully, you guys have read the newsletter from the end of the year. I love going in and reading it. There's a lot of information in there, but we'll go over some of it. Basically, this is a 3-hour course, and every hour you can have a 10-minute break. So if you guys are okay with it, after the first hour, about 11:10, we'll take a 10-minute break so you can answer emails, do whatever you need to do, get a drink, and then we'll push through the rest and just tack on those last 20, 30 minutes at the end so you can get out a little bit early. That's usually what people want to do, so hopefully that's okay. If you want to scan this code on your phone, it will show up a Google Doc. And remember, in these kind of Zoom classes, you have to give 4 out of the 5 keywords to get credit to make sure you're paying attention. So after the class is over, please don't say, I didn't know I was supposed to keep track of the words. What are the words? We can go in and look and see if you were on the call the whole time, but please make sure you write down the words as I give them out so that you can put them in this spreadsheet or this Google Doc. You can also email the keywords if you don't like scanning for the Google Doc, and my email address is there. Or if you work with James, you can also email them to him and we'll make sure you get credit. But just remember, listen for your keywords and make sure you either write them down or put them in this Google Doc. And I'll put this up again so that if you want to just write them down and then at the end you can put them in, then that's fine too. Okay, usually we give, 15 minutes for people to kind of join, but I always like to start with a market update. And just so all of you know, I really like participation in these classes because I don't know how long you've been in the industry, but I haven't seen everything. I'm sure you guys haven't seen everything that there is to see. And so learning from each other is a big part of these classes, and it makes it much more interesting and beneficial to everybody if we share our experiences. Okay, I have Erin Roberts on here. She's going to kind of monitor for me. Erin, if you can put the link in the chat. Do you have the link? Did Thomas send it to you?
I don't have the link.
Okay, let me
Do you,
forward it to you. And then she'll put a link too that you can click on if you don't want to use your phone to get the Google Doc too. Let me just forward it to her. Okay, perfect. Okay. What's going on with rates? Somebody brave, tell me, what do you guys follow rates? Do you get emails about rates from lenders? How do you keep track of what's going on so that you can talk to your clients about a little bit about rates?
They're holding fairly steady.
They are. And they have been for a little while. We went up a little bit with some of the Greenland stuff and bonds and all these things, but I wanted to read you today what the guy I follow said. So, yesterday saw mortgage bonds improve through the day after the morning brought a series of labor reports that showed a softer labor market than markets were anticipating. So, jobs data, labor markets, those are the kind of things that are affecting us. We do talk a lot about the Fed's lowering rates, but that doesn't directly equate to a lowering in mortgage rates. So, keep that in mind when you're talking to people so that you give them good expectations. Typically, when we think that there's going to be a lowering in Fed rates, the market's already priced that in as far as lenders are concerned. So sometimes we're waiting and they say, okay, we're going to lower it, and then they lower it, and we don't see an immediate drop in rates, and that's confusing to people. So just so you know, a lot of times the market's already priced in if we're pretty sure that the Feds are going to lower the rates. They didn't this last time. And so we're kind of waiting for the next Fed meeting. I know a lot of people are waiting for Trump or for Powell to get out. And then a lot of people are speculating that Trump will do what he needs to do to get somebody in there who's going to lower rates. So we'll see. Um, but right now, rates are actually fairly good. If you've been around for a little while, you realize that they could be way higher and that these are decent rates. I had a borrower the other day. I reached out and said, "Hey, are you still looking? What are you thinking?" It's like, we're going to wait until rates are below 4 before we start looking again. Okay, good luck, right? Like, so there is a cost to waiting, and we want to help people understand that there is a real cost to waiting for rates to come down. I saw a TikTok the other day where a lender was on there and he was showing exactly the numbers. If you wait, like if you could get 6.5, right now we're a little bit lower than that. But let's say you're a conventional loan, we're in the mid to low sixes for conventional, no buy downs. We're in the mid to low fives for FHA, VA. So we really are in a really good spot right now. But he was just showing buyers and borrowers that, let's say that you get a 6.5 rate right now and you get a good deal, sellers are paying concessions, you wait until we're down in the mid fives. Now price point is higher and you paid more for the deal for the property and you didn't get any money from the sellers. So it ends up, being better to have bought before and then just refinance later. I know that's hard for people right now, and there are people who just can't qualify, and that's a real problem too. But let's be positive, and hopefully 2026 will be your best year. So anyway, it's good to follow somebody if you want somebody to follow. I really like this guy that I follow. He sends emails for free every day. So let me know if you want me to send you that information. You can just email me or put it in the chat. Aaron, if somebody puts something like that in the chat, will you make a note?
Yes, I will.
Okay, let's talk about uh, the first part of the class is going to be agency basics, and then we're going to talk a little bit about fiduciary duties, and then we're going to end with like basics of the contract. We're going to go over a lot of scenarios and talk about those different scenarios. We're going to talk about disciplinary actions that were in the newsletter end of the year. I think those are always good to notice what people are doing that's wrong, not so much so that we can point fingers, but just remember some of them are just good reminders of being careful about your advertising and things like that. There are definitely reasons and reasons why people do things that are illegal, right? There's a lot of monetary things that happen. There's a lot of benefits to, or there's reasons why people would do things. And so it's good to talk about it and just remind ourselves the things that we need to be careful of. Okay, fiduciary is a noun. So, an individual in whom another has placed the utmost trust and confidence to manage and protect property or money, the relationship wherein one person has an obligation to act for another's benefit. Okay, so you as real estate agents are a fiduciary, right? You're acting in somebody else's benefit, and your responsibility is to act in the best benefit of your primary. So whoever you have the contract with, not in your best interest, but in their best interest. And that's sometimes where people get hung up and end up doing things that aren't ethically right or what we should be doing or some of those kinds of things. Ethics is a little bit debatable, but for the most part, we all have similar ethics and similar ways that we should be treating somebody. There, when we get to looking at our own benefits, sometimes that gets muddied and that's kind of a problem. Okay, so you basically always want to be acting as if somebody's watching. Have you heard that thing where like, okay, what would I do when nobody's watching, right? And ideally, we would do the same thing whether everybody's watching or whether nobody's watching. And so that's kind of a good arrow mark. Like, even if nobody's watching, we want to do the best thing that we can. So in 2017, we did a survey. Where did real estate agents land as far as trustworthiness, do you think? I put this on lots of my classes, but
I'm going to say at the very bottom, maybe right above used car salesman.
you're pretty close, Garrison, which is sad, right? And the people that I am working with, they really are almost everybody, right? But this one person that does something bad and then everybody thinks about it and worries about it, and it really does muddy the water. So it's sad how that happens. I was actually talking to one of my friends the other day in lots of different scenarios. One bad person or one bad mistake muddies the water for everybody in lots of different situations. And so, yeah, we just want to be super careful, and it is sad, but it is the truth. Okay, let's just do this definition, and I'll show you that survey. Simply put, the term fiduciary means a party who holds a legal or ethical relationship of trust with one or more others. Right now, we're talking about real estate agents and the contract you have with your principal. Usually, the two parties have entered into an agreement together where explicit or implied, with one party acting as the representative and making decisions on behalf of the others, with the duties of good faith and acting in the principal's best interest. Classic examples: trustees, executors, guardians, real estate professionals. Okay, so I want to just tell you something that happened recently. So a client had listed their home with an agent, went and talked to another agent, and they signed a buyer broker agreement. Ethical or not ethical? What do you guys think?
It's ethical.
That's
Okay.
ethical.
Okay, so they can totally do that. If you are working with somebody and you know their house is listed with somebody else, does that mean that they have implied relationship with another agent?
If house is already listed with another agent,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I would say that that's already implied because they're working with them.
Right, so, but they're gonna sell and they're gonna buy.
I say no.
Oh, no, then you have the right to try and be a buyer's agent, wouldn't you? Because they haven't signed a buyer broker agreement. They've
Right,
just signed
The
exclusive right to
contract is,
list.
yeah, the
right,
contract's only for the sale.
Yeah,
right,
not
Right,
necessarily.
right.
right. Okay.
You may want to ask them first.
And that's what I was kind of getting at. Okay, do you have an agent that you're already working with? Have you already told them that you were going to be their buyer, right? So there's some things like that. But yeah, if they haven't signed a contract, right? But and now gets a little bit less muddy with the rules that we have now, where you have to sign a contract with somebody to go show a house, right? So if you're going to show somebody a house, you have to have a buyer broker with them, and and it can just be for that one property, right? And that's what people do a lot of times right now. But if you're showing houses, the rule is you have to have an agreement with them signed. Has anybody had any issues with that? Is everybody feeling like, okay, this is totally just normal day-to-day business now? No issues with that new rule that came out? Anybody have any issues that they want to share with us with that?
Isn't there one where it's just a touring agreement for one property? You don't have to do an entire BRP. Like Zillow has those touring agreements, and that suffices because that explains what your compensation is as well. Just if you're just going to show.
Just for that one house, yeah, yeah. So there are touring agreements that isn't a full buyer broker too, or you can do a buyer broker agreement for just that one property. Thanks, Cassandra. Okay.
In
Okay, so
Utah,
here,
this is not a huge change for Utah. A lot of the country didn't use the buyer broker agreement.
right, and we did for the most part, but I know there were agents who didn't have one signed, but I think most of the brokers wanted you to do that, right, Gordon? Yeah, yeah. So it hasn't been, I've actually really liked how the contract is, and it shows the compensation for the buyer, and it seems like it's working really well. I'm not on your side. I just get the contract once it's done, but seems like it's working pretty well. And I haven't had complaints from buyers or anything like that either. Okay, yeah, real estate agents right above advertising people and car salesmen, just like Garrison said.
Do have a question
Yeah.
regarding us as real estate agents. Are we required to sign a broker agreement, buyer broker agreement for ourselves when we're viewing homes that we're looking at purchasing ourselves?
No.
We just sign, or do we need to sign that we're representing ourselves?
Yes, you do.
When you're
Yeah.
writing the Rep C, you do.
You
Okay.
do in all agency agreements because the agency agreements are between the brokerage and the client, not you personally, but you are under the umbrella of the brokerage. So it does seem redundant and annoying, but yes, you do have to fill out your own buyer broker agreement, your own listing agreements.
Thank you.
And it's actually called an addendum of interest. I'm selling my house right now and I have to fill one out as today.
And that's an addendum of interest to the Rep C or to your buyer broker agreement?
Um, to my Rep C because I'm selling.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so the Rep C usually will say if there's an interested party, or if you're a real estate agent yourself. But then Lindsay, thank you for clarifying that you have to have that buyer broker for yourself too. That would go into your file, right? Because it's a contract between you and the broker. Okay. Okay, here, if you want to scan this again, I put this up. You can write down my email for the end. You can click in the link, click on the link. Just make sure you're keeping track of your keywords. We're gonna give the first one at 10:20. Okay, let's go into the specific fiduciary duties that all licensees owe to their clients. You can do a lot of people talk about it as old car. If you've taken these classes before, been in the industry for a long time, you've seen all this multiple times. But I added education because I really think that education is a super huge part of your responsibilities as a real estate agent. When you finish your class as a real estate agent, do you know everything you need to know about how to be a real estate agent? So you get your license, right? And you still have a lot to learn. It's the same with lenders, right? We get our license and now we know how to not commit fraud or things like that, but we don't actually know how to do loans. And so there's a lot of work you need to do on becoming educated and staying educated in the market as it changes. So I feel like that's also a responsibility that you have as agents. Okay, so here are the duties required of licensed individuals. Okay, obedience. We're going to talk about each of these in depth. Obedience, obey all lawful instructions from the principal. We're going to talk about what things you do and don't have to do if your principal is asking you to do things. Okay, lawful being the key word. Loyalty, place the principal's interest above all else, including your interests, which sometimes can come into conflict. Disclosure, full disclosure. Agents must inform the principal of any material facts the agent learns about the other party or the transaction. Now, be careful which side you're on and make sure you're only, if you're on the seller side, you're not telling the buyer side things that you haven't gotten permission to tell from the sellers and vice versa. Confidentiality, agent cannot disclose any information about the principal without prior written permission. A lot of people will say, like once I get off the phone with somebody, I'm gonna immediately say, here's an email of what we discussed. Is this what you agreed on? So that you have a written trail of whatever you've agreed on and what the principal has agreed for you to disclose or do on their behalf. Accounting holds safe in any money, right? So you're entrusted with, on the buyer side, earnest money, and you want to make sure that that's reasonable care and diligence. It's getting, we haven't had much of a winter yet, but when you're looking through homes and it's, muddy or wet or whatever, be super careful that you take care of the properties that you're showing and use reasonable care. Okay, education, like I said, is super important. We want to make sure that we continue to be educated and know what's going on in the market. Okay, obedience. Let's talk about this a little bit in more depth. An agent is obligated to obey promptly and efficiently all lawful instructions of the principal. However, this duty plainly does not include an obligation to obey any unlawful instructions. For example, an instruction not to market the property to minorities or to misrepresent the condition of the property. Compliance with instructions the agent knows to be unlawful could constitute a breach of an agent's duty of loyalty. So give me an example of something somebody might ask you to do that you would have to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That violates my loyalty and my duty. And then let's talk about some that you would need to do. So
tell them about a known issue.
Okay, good. Your seller's agent, you find out about some issue, you know about it. They don't want you to tell. They don't want you to put it in the MLS listing. They don't want you to tell. What do you do?
Explain to them that you have to by law.
Okay.
Yeah, legally have to put that down and and just be upfront about it.
Right. And you as the agent know all these things, right? Like, so you know what you need to do. You know what's going to happen if they don't disclose. You know, so your knowledge is going to be key here, right? Explaining to them, okay, this is what will happen. And at the end of the day, if they don't want to do, right, explain why it's in their best interest to fully disclose. I like that, Brittany. It really does, like if they later find out, now we've got seller disclosures, but you want to make sure that they're disclosing. And when you're filling out the seller disclosures, I have a question. When you're doing a listing agreement, do you make sure the seller's disclosures are all filled out before you even make it live? Or how does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a legal obligation. John, did you say yeah?
Yeah, I said yeah.
Yeah, so
I
it's
did have a question, and I get a little confused with the disclosures. I had a situation where my neighbor was selling his place. I wasn't the agent, but I did know there was black mold, and he covered it up. And I didn't tell the neighbor because I didn't want to undo the deal. So when should you or shouldn't you say something? Does that make sense?
yeah, so you weren't the agent on the deal, right?
No,
Mm-hmm. So that
but
gets
I didn't want to undo the deal.
right, sure.
So I'm drawn in between not undoing the deal and disclosing the black mold.
And
So
how
what
did
do I
you
do?
know the black mold on the neighbor's house? He just told you.
I was there.
Oh,
So I know he encased it in the wall, and he didn't get like Utah disaster cleanup to come out and clean it out.
yeah. So,
And I had a guy that actually worked for Utah disaster that said he wouldn't touch it because it was the bad kind. So I didn't say anything, but it's like, what do I do?
yeah,
I think
right.
that I think
Yeah,
you should disclose that because that's a material fact.
Right. So,
If
because
you're
yeah,
not representing someone, you're not representing someone.
I'm not. Yeah,
yeah, he's not the agent on the deal. If he was the agent on the deal, then for sure, right? He's just
sure.
Oh,
a
okay.
Yeah,
neighbor. Yeah, he's just a neighbor. So you feel bad, right? Because you're like, okay, but it isn't necessarily your responsibility.
even
Um,
as an agent.
You're not
Okay.
a party to the contract.
Right, right.
right.
Well,
But
that's
at
why
the
I
same
didn't do it.
time,
That's
right.
why I didn't do it, but I was having a hard time with it.
Right, because now you have somebody who lives next door to you and you know that they just moved into a house that has black mold that's hidden.
Right. And they're getting sick and they don't know why. And I'm like,
What if they
duh.
ask you though? What if your neighbor asked you? So do you know anything about this
Yeah,
house?
he did ask me.
Okay, then I would disclose it because as a good neighbor, I would just be like, hey, you should check this out. I'm not sure if it is, but you should have it checked. That's what I would
Yeah,
say.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question. I don't think we have like a solid answer because it's one of those things where it's like you're not required.
yeah.
But at the same time, like if they asked you, that's a personal opinion what you decide to do. But that's sad, right? Because
Right.
It it
somebody.
falls under personal. So you're not a part of it as a licensee, but as a personal neighbor, just what you choose to do, that's where it falls. But there's no like legal obligation.
Right,
Was the
right.
buyer represent, or was the seller represented by an agent?
Yeah.
Then you should probably go talk to the agent and see if the agent knows about it. If the
Right.
agent knows about it, then and they're not disclosing it, then
That's a
you
good
might want to
point.
report it to his broker.
That's a good.
If he doesn't know about it, you may have tell him you may want to ask the homeowner about it because in the seller disclosure it should be documented there. And if the seller doesn't disclose that and it gets caught, that seller is open to lawsuits.
That's a good point.
I have a question that you
That's the
guys
best
might be
answer.
able to answer.
That's the best answer, I think.
So, why wouldn't we have to? So, like, before I was doing this, I was gonna be a nurse, and like you're held legal to responsibility. Like, say I'm in my car and I drive by somebody that gets hit by a car, like I have a legal responsibility to stop. Like, if somebody knew I saw it and didn't stop, like they could turn me in and take my license. So how come it's not the same thing for agents to like, if you know something like your situation, like your neighbor, and you're asked about it, like how come we're not held liable to disclose it? Is it just because it doesn't affect us or what?
Well, it's because you don't have a contract to be the
Well,
one.
I think what Jared said applies there is we didn't have, I'm not a party to the contract.
But
But the
ethically,
other
right?
gentleman is probably the best, I think the best answer to talk to the other agent, tell the other agent, and make sure it's in the disclosures.
They
And
find the
that,
black mold after the fact and it wasn't disclosed, and you know, and you find it, the seller's going to be liable.
Right.
That'll survive closing even without
Well, he's
disclosure. Like
he's he's
that's
found it
that's an
now.
issue.
I mean, he's remodeled the basement, so he's found it. But
yeah, so I think you're right. Like that is, I mean, it is kind of an interesting thing, but yeah, going if you really are feeling like you want to say something, going to the other agent and talking to them about it and seeing if they know. Let's go back to, thanks for your question. Let's go back to some of the chats. So like Barbara's saying legal obligation to disclose known facts. Yes, I review the seller's disclosures before listing to make sure it's completed and no boxes are missing. Must disclose if asked, but no volunteer if not involved. It's a requirement at my company that we can't go live until we have the SPCD completed. I think that's a good, I mean, obviously you want to know what they put in there. I had a buyer who went under contract with a property, and the sellers did complete the SPCD, but they didn't put in that there had been mold and that it was remediated. So when we did, as the buyer, all the tests, the mold came back super high, but we couldn't see where they couldn't see where it was coming from or anything like that. So then we went back to the seller's disclosures, and there was no disclosure that there had been mold. Um, and so that's a big deal, right? Because they're supposed to disclose anything that happened, even if it's been remediated. And so yeah, then at that point, here's the seller's agent who I happen to know, and she's like, yeah, they didn't disclose it, but obviously it's here. Now we've got to redo our seller's disclosures, make sure they know it, and continue the cleanup because it's obviously still in the air. So my buyers backed out of that one. They didn't feel like they wanted to move forward when there was already something that had not been disclosed. But again, that's something that you can talk to your sellers about. Non-disclosure of things makes a big difference when you're dealing with people and then it's found out later. Um, Pam says you can anonymously report this through the listing on the MLS. Barbara says, according to ChatGPT, once the agent discloses a material fact, they are not involved, then they become liable if they knowingly give false or misleading information. Suggestion, if not involved, don't comment and refer them to the agent involved or conduct their own inspections. Yeah, it'll be interesting to know. Yeah, sometimes the inspections don't come back and show anything, and so then it's just hidden. I had another deal where and this was ended up being the buyer's own choice, right? There wasn't really anything legally he could do, but they could tell that the floor was needed to be replaced. And so they said, do you want to do any more testings on the floor? It was kind of ripply. And he just said, no, I'm going to replace the whole thing anyway. I don't care. Well, when he started to pull it up, there was a bunch of mold underneath the floor. But he had said, no, I don't want to do anything else, right? The only thing probably is if the sellers didn't disclose that there had been a water leak, right? And so had they not disclosed that, maybe. But make sure when you're the buyer's agent that you say, okay, this is what this means. If you don't want to pull up the floor or do any further testing to find out why there's this rippling, you could find mold under there, right? So just giving them all the information, letting them make their decisions. And then my agent probably should have had that in writing, right? So if you're having a phone conversation or a conversation with them, then sending them an email that says, I know you noticed we were walking together through here, the floor is rippling, there was obviously some water damage. You decided that you didn't want to move forward with any kind of further testing because you were going to rip up. That would have probably been a good thing for him to have. Because later it ended up going into litigation. Yeah, John, thank you. Let's have our first word be mold. Appreciate that. I always get going. Okay, first word, word number one, mold. First word is mold. Okay, loyalty.
I will choose the next one too.
Okay, you help me with my words. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
How many
Loyalty.
keywords are there going to be? Is there going to be 6, I think,
There's
or
5 of them, and you have to remember 4. So there's 5 keywords. Okay, a duty of loyalty is one of the most fundamental fiduciary duties owned by an agent to his principal. This duty obligates a real estate broker to act at all times solely in the best interest of his principal to the exclusion of all other interests, including the broker's own self-interest. A corollary of this duty of loyalty is a duty to avoid steadfastly any conflicts of interest that might compromise or dilute the broker's undivided loyalty to his principal's interests. A little bit later, we're going to talk about, when you're representing both sides. So, and some of the problems that come with that, right? So, but you have to be super careful in those cases and careful always that you're looking at the principal's best interest. There's lots of times when it can be muddied a little bit because they might be in conflict. Like, for example, what about, purchase price, right? Your interest is that you want the purchase price to be the highest possible. Your buyer's interest is you want it to be the lowest possible, right? So we're always going to do what would be in the best interest of the buyers and on that side. Seller's side, their best interest is the highest, getting the highest net possible. Okay, thus a real estate broker's duty of loyalty prohibits him from accepting employment from any person whose interests compete with or are adverse to his principal's interests. Always be on the lookout for opportunities that will benefit your principal. Classic example of breach of this duty of loyalty by a real estate broker is a broker who purchases property listed with his firm and then immediately resells it at a profit. Such conduct ordinarily is perfectly appropriate and lawful for persons acting at arm's length, but a fiduciary will be deemed to have stolen a profit opportunity rightfully belonging to his principal unless have breached his duty of loyalty. In another class, somebody asked, okay, but what if somebody comes to me and says, I just want to sell this as is, I just want to sell it at this price. Well, if you put in this money to it, you could get a lot more out of it if you redid it, whatever. And the people are like, nope, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to deal with that. Just sell it for this amount and you buy it. There's a little bit of an argument about that. Okay, but no, they want to sell it at this price and they don't want to do all the extra work to get more profit. And you've explained all that to them. And then the agent ended up buying that property and reselling it and doing the work herself. So there can be gray areas, but we want to stay as close as we can to what's the first word is mold. Just make sure to document it all, Kim says. I think that's a fair thing, right? Document, make sure that everybody agrees, make sure that they understand what they're agreeing to, and that helps a lot. Get it all in writing good. Okay, let's talk about disclosure. An agent is obligated to disclose to his principal all relevant and material information that the agent knows and that pertains to the scope of the agency. Disclosure obligates a real estate broker representing a seller to reveal to the seller all offers to purchase the seller's property. Now, back a couple years ago when you were getting 50 offers, was that a little bit of a pain? Yeah. And a lot of people talked about making spreadsheets with offers to send, or sellers saying, don't send me all the offers, just send me the top 5, all those kinds of things, right? And then people saying, okay, they told me just to send the top 5, so but I'm sending them all to them anyway, and here's my recommendation of my top 5, but you are obligated to send all offers. So there's different markets when this is a little bit more complicated than other markets. The identity of all potential purchasers. So we can't hide who's buying it. Sometimes we talk about love letters in this section. Most brokerages do not like love letters and discourage people from sending them. Opens up the sellers to possible lawsuits, discrimination, those kinds of things. Do they work? Yes, sometimes they do. But maybe check with your broker before you submit any offers with love letters. Any facts affecting the property, information concerning the ability or willingness of the buyer to complete the sale or to offer a higher price. If you know the buyers can offer a higher price because the buyer's agent has told you something like that, then that's certainly information the sellers would want. you have a lot of information that your sellers don't, right? Which is why they're hiring you. And so making sure they understand that a higher price isn't necessarily a better offer, especially when somebody just comes in with a super high price that most likely won't appraise. The broker's relationship to or interest in a prospective buyer. If you, as a seller's agent, know the buyer personally, related to the buyer, those kind of things need to be disclosed. The broker's, let's see, a buyer's intention to subdivide or resell the property for a profit. Why would somebody not want to disclose that to their sellers if they know it? If the buyer's agent has given you that information, why would there be a case when you wouldn't want to disclose that? Or you might have some reason. What do you think? Some brave soul. Tell me what you think.
If they said, I'll pay more for the house and they asked you not to say anything, like you don't have to.
Okay. Okay. And the buyer's agent should realize if they're talking to you that your interest is with the sellers, right? So be careful as buyer's agent what you tell sellers agents. Okay, so that's one reason. What else? You as a seller's agent, why would you have some sort of incentive to not tell about subdividing or reselling the property?
If someone's selling like a family farm and they want it to stay like it is or have the idea to stay like it is, but the buyer wants to subdivide it, make a giant subdivision, then they may not want that. So
Right. And so you as a seller's agent, you'd be like, well, if I tell them that, they might not accept this offer and then I won't get paid.
I would say your obligation is to tell them, especially if you know that they don't want it to be subdivided.
For sure. For sure, right? And I'm just saying like there could be people who are not as ethical about that and they might say, well, I'm not going to tell him because then they won't accept it and then I don't get paid, right? So there are times when that conflict of what's best for the sellers may not be exactly what's best for the seller's agent in their mind, but just reminding us that we have to do what's best for our sellers. So there are times when that might be an incentive or come across your brain. So yeah, I appreciate Karen that would never be something that would come across your brain. You would always be like, yeah, for sure, I want to let them know because they don't want to sell it for that. And they don't like that. And I'm their agent and they're my principal and I want to get them what they want.
Well, honestly, personal integrity comes into this too. If you disclose all this to them and they still make the decision to move forward, your conscience is clear. They made an educated decision. Um, Hiding the fact is just as bad as lying. So
For sure. For
that's a
sure.
no-go.
For sure. And I appreciate how ethical most agents are about that kind of stuff, right? And the only reason why we have these classes is because there are some who aren't. And so we want to make sure, but for sure ethics is intertwined in this heavily. And personal ethics and business ethics are all intertwined, I feel like. Um, any information that might affect the seller's ability to obtain the highest price and best terms in the sale of their property. So you may know something when you go to sit down with a seller about their property that they don't know. And that's why they're paying you. And we appreciate what you guys do. Okay, so on the buyer side, willingness of a seller to accept a lower price. If you find that out when you're talking to the seller's agent, hopefully the seller's agent has gotten permission from the sellers to say that, right? Because they shouldn't be telling the buyer's agent that they could go lower unless the sellers have authorized them to do that in writing. But why would a buyer's agent be incentivized not to tell a buyer that the sellers would be willing to go lower? Kind of a similar idea as what we talked about on the seller side, but now it's on the buyer side.
We'll get less commission.
Right.
Agents
Right.
are incentivized to make deals, not necessarily get their clients the most money. It's the commission structure is not, it doesn't correlate with what's in the best interest of the clients.
Okay. So you as a buyer's agent though, right? You're going to want, ethically, you're going to want to tell them, okay, yeah, they'll go lower, even though you're going to get a lower commission. Is that what you're saying, Garrison? And that's the right thing to do?
No, you shouldn't say that they would no, you shouldn't do that. You should do the exact opposite. You should say, submit whatever you want to submit, and I'll present it to the clients and they'll make a decision. But I can't tell you whether they'll accept less. I don't know that.
Well, and you're talking on the seller side now, right? And we're talking on the buyer side. So on the buyer
Oh,
side, the seller says, if you're right. On the seller side for sure, right? But on the buyer side, if you get information from the seller side that says that they're willing to accept a lower offer, then you should give that information to your buyers, but you might be incentivized
yes.
not to, right? Because your commission will be a little bit lower. So I just was trying
Your
to talk about
fiduciary duty is to your buyer, so you need to be able to do
exactly.
his best interest, not your own.
I've
Yes,
had
on the buyer
agents.
side, absolutely, you should
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
them that, even if it means your commission is lower.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make is that there are some times when you would be incentivized if you're only thinking about yourself to do something different than what would benefit your principal. And so that's kind of the point that we're trying to make here. So good, yeah. So you for sure should tell them. Now, again, like I said, this on the seller side, hopefully they've gotten written permission from the sellers to let you know that. But I have had sellers agents tell me things as a lender when I've called to verify lending for my buyers that I wouldn't think the sellers would want to be told, right? But they're trying to make a deal too. And so just be super careful when you're giving information that you have written permission from your principal. Any facts relating to the urgency of the seller's need to dispose of the property, you as the buyer's agent will want to let them know. If they really need to sell, that gives you a little bit more bargaining power, and you'd also want to figure out your loan so that you could close really quickly. The broker's relationship or interest, those are on both sides, right? Any interest you have as an agent to the property or people selling or needs to be submitted. So again, if you're a buyer's agent and you're submitting an offer for a family member, you want to submit that with the interest sheet, the addendum that shows that you have an interest that you're related to them. Okay. What are the rules again, real quick, about who you have to submit legally for that? What family members do you absolutely have to? Now, my opinion is you should always submit if you're related to somebody that you're working with, but which relationships do you have to? Immediate family, Barbara said. Okay. So that would be mom, dad, brothers and sisters, kids, or self. Good, for sure. Funnily enough, grandparents are not in that. But if I'm doing a deal for my grandparents, I'm submitting that I'm related to them. Just because I don't see why you wouldn't. And it doesn't hurt the deal, and it only protects you. Okay. The length of time the property has been on the market. If you're a member of a trust, okay, good. You want to disclose, right? Over disclosure, I guess sometimes can hurt, but as far as who you're working for, over disclosure protects you. Okay. The length of time the property's been on the market, that makes a difference. Why has this property been on the market for 200 days? Let's find out about this. Is there a deal to be made if you're on the buyer's side? Any other information that would affect the buyer's ability to obtain the property at the lowest price and most favorable terms. Okay, so when you're on that buyer's side, your interest, everything you're doing is to benefit the buyer. An agent's duty of disclosure to his principal must not be confused with a real estate broker's duty to disclose to non-principals any known material fact concerning the value of the property. This duty to disclose known material facts is based upon a real estate broker's duty to treat all persons honestly and fairly. This duty of honesty and fairness does not depend on the existence of an agency relationship. Okay, let's talk about, are you guys as real estate agents inspectors? Are you CPAs? Are you
No, we're not
lawyers?
licensed.
Okay, so be careful when you're giving information, but also what are you responsible for? When you're walking through a seller's home, right? Let's talk about the fact that they might know something and never tell you, right? So you're responsible for what you can see, but you're not responsible for things you can't see. And that's why a buyers should always get inspections to find anything, because sellers may not know stuff too. Legitimately not trying to hide something, but not know something. And so they're doing the very best they can with what they know. And especially on a property that's been sold multiple times, they're not the original owners, right? They're going off of what they know from that property. So super important to get an inspection and see what comes back and find out. So make sure you have a good inspector that you trust that can get in there quickly so that you can get your appraisal ordered. Okay, any questions on disclosure, any experiences that you want to share? Okay, buyer beware. Okay, thanks, Barbara. Confidentiality. An agent is obligated to safeguard the principal's confidence and secrets. A real estate broker therefore must keep confidential any information that might weaken his principal's bargaining position. So again, seller's agent, you know that they have to sell super fast. Make sure you know what your sellers are willing for you to disclose to the buyer's agent so that when you're negotiating and talking to a buyer's agent, you know exactly what your sellers want you to disclose, because it does weaken their position a little bit when they're super desperate, right? And so how much are they willing to disclose to the buyers when you're negotiating? Make sure you have that in writing. On the buyer side, same thing. Like, we don't want to move twice, please, you know, all those things that make you a little bit more vulnerable. Make sure you know what your buyers are willing to let you disclose. This duty of confidentiality precludes a broker representing a seller from disclosing to a buyer that the seller can or must sell his property below the listed price. Conversely, a broker representing a buyer is prohibited from disclosing to a seller that the buyer can or will pay more for a property than has been offered. John, caveat emptor. I don't know what that means, but I want to laugh too.
It means buyer beware.
Okay.
In Latin.
Okay, I don't speak Latin. Come on. Okay, an agent, let's see, caveat, this duty of confidentiality plainly does not include any obligation on a broker representing a seller to withhold from a buyer known material facts concerning the condition of the seller's property. Okay, so you as a seller probably, if you know a material fact that your seller hasn't listed, you probably shouldn't be listing that property, right? Because if your seller doesn't want you to disclose it and you have this secret, then now you're putting yourself up for legal ramifications, right? Because if you know something and then you're supposed to tell your buyer, but your seller doesn't want you to, it's probably not a property that you need listed. And I have heard agents say, I just tell them I'm not your agent because I'm not willing to do it this way. I'm not willing to list your property knowing there's something wrong and having you tell me I can't tell anybody. So decide what you're willing to do before you go into those appointments. An agent is obligated to account for all money or property belonging to his principal that is entrusted to him. This duty compels a real estate broker to safeguard any monies, deeds, or other documents entrusted to him that relate to his client's transaction or affairs. Who's responsible for the earnest money, making sure it gets to title or to the brokerage on time? Buyer or seller's agent?
The buyer's agent. Well, they both are actually.
Thank you. Trick question. Both, okay? So typically the buyer's agent is going to be responsible. The seller's agent might be calling and saying, hey, did you get your earnest money in? Right? Let me know. Make sure that it's in on time and the buyers aren't in breach. What do you need to have if your earnest money is going to be at title, held at title? I just got a contract in yesterday where the earnest money is held in title. What also did I get? But in the chat, an addendum stating that the earnest money will be held at title. I've seen the actual addendum. I've also seen just a regular addendum with the writing in it that says it will be held at this title company. Both of those are fine. Your client is actually in breach of the contract. Your buyer is in breach if you're holding earnest money at title, but you don't have the addendum stating that in the contract. So be careful. I had a contract recently that came in and we got it all signed. And the next day, the seller's agent called my buyer's agent and said, do you want to get out of the contract? We just got another offer that's significantly higher. We want to take it. What happens in this case?
And the earnest money's not where it's supposed to be? Is that what you're saying?
We're not in breach. So we just barely signed the contract. How many days do you have to get your earnest money in? Calendar days.
3.
4 calendar days per the contract.
4 to get it to the agent and then 4 more for the agent to get it deposited.
Correct. Do lenders like it when you wait the full 8 days?
No.
No, because we've got to document it. Okay, so you've got 4 days to get it to the buyer's agent, 4 days to get it deposited. So it's not deposited yet, but we're not in breach. Seller's agent calls the day after you sign the contract and says, do you guys want to back out? Is there any of the properties you want? We want you to back out because we got a new contract that's better than this one, nets us significantly higher.
And you
No,
talk
you
to your
can't.
buyer, but you're under contract. So unless they want to terminate, your buyer has a contract.
Right. So throughout the whole process, right, what are we worried about immediately?
Fiduciary responsibility.
Making sure the buyer does not breach their contract. Because if they breach their contract, of course, we know the sellers aren't gonna extend anything. They immediately told us they weren't gonna give any repair money. They weren't gonna do anything for us, right? And so we knew if we didn't perform and make sure. Now, what are the breaches that a buyer can do? Earnest money at title, right? Not having an addendum. So I immediately was like, okay, where's the earnest money? And it wasn't at title, it was at the brokerage, so we were okay.
Not closing on time.
Excuse me?
Not closing on time.
Not closing on time is a big one, right? So first of all, making sure the earnest money gets there within the days so that we're not breached that way. Not passing any deadlines, right? So as soon as we got our inspection, there was a few things they're like, we're not doing anything. Okay, fine. And then financing and appraisal. So me as the lender, I'm making sure that we don't need extensions for anything. And then this is another thing you guys might be interested because we had to ask lawyers about this. The buyer's agent did not submit an FHA addendum with the original contract. Now, the seller's agent said, we're not signing that. You guys are in breach. What do you think happened? You didn't originally submit that FHA addendum, so your buyer's in breach. We're not signing that addendum. We're not signing a disclosure.
The buyer has to back out if they can't go conventional.
Okay. Anybody agree or disagree?
In Idaho, sorry, I always struggle between the two states, but in Idaho, we disclose in the contract if it's going to be FHA. So even if we haven't signed that addendum, they would know ahead. I don't think in Utah we do that, right?
We don't.
No, you do.
Well, usually.
Oh, you don't?
Well, usually a lot of agents will send an addendum with their offer, but I do have agents who don't. So I'm curious what you guys think.
Well, isn't it on the
We
Rep
should.
C on part of where the deadlines are at? It asks, like, I don't know which section it is, but it asks if it's going to be funded and like, is it an FHA VA loan? It's like, and you have to click if it is, and then if it is, you attach the addendum to it. But even if you click that, it doesn't really matter if the addendum's not sent at the exact same time because you're clicking how they're lending out the money. If that's not clicked, I think that's different, but
So in
wouldn't that
Idaho, on the Idaho contract, it does say that, but Utah contract doesn't tell you what type of loan in the Rep C. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know a part that says that.
They used to.
Okay, I don't see it in the Rep C.
So
the thing is, it's also included on the MLS as an attachment if you're doing your job or if the buyer's agent is doing their job correctly.
Okay, now this is what I wanted to go into because you can do, so when we submitted the offer without the addendum, okay? That contract is fine. And we submitted a pre-approval letter with FHA. So I said to the seller's agent, we submitted it with FHA. You knew from the pre-approval letter it was going FHA. What do you need to, you don't have to, so if the addendum does change the contract if you do an addendum, but what can you get for the loan that's not an addendum that allows you to go FHA?
your finance deadline?
Okay, you have your finance deadline, so you can back out. They don't want to back out. You can get what's called an FHA disclosure. It's not an addendum. It's not part of the Rep C. You're going to submit it, just like Marcel said, with your documents to your brokerage, but it's called a disclosure. And so we can't. The lawyers basically said that the sellers are in breach if they don't sign it because you can't tell a buyer what kind of loan they can do as the seller.
Section 2.1 of the Rep C allow buyer to choose the loan they want to choose even after.
So they would have been in breach. So now when did they sign it, do you think?
At closing.
Correct. Because, once you pass the financing and appraisal deadline, if you can't close, you lose your earnest money, right? But they did. And they, up until the very last day, were saying they were not going to sign. So
there would be one exception if it's a condominium that doesn't accept FHA.
Correct. And so then you can't get the loan anyway, right? So then it's a loan issue more than anything else. So and in that case, hopefully the seller's agent isn't listing that it will go FHA.
So in that situation, did they refused to sign the FHA addendum, but they'd signed the disclosure at closing, or did they sign both?
Correct. Nope, they signed the disclosure. And in that case, both the seller's agents have to sign and the buyer and the sellers. Everybody has to sign it. And we had sent that to them to sign, and they were like, we're not signing this. You didn't tell us what it was an FHA loan, anyway. But that went all the way up to the lawyers, because we were worried we didn't want our buyers to lose their earnest money. So we had to make sure that we were right in saying, okay, yeah, they can't tell us that they won't sign, they will be in breach. But anyway, so interesting things that you're going to come across, right? You can, submitting the FHA addendum. Why would a buyer's agent not want to submit? What would be the strategy in not submitting the FHA addendum with the offer? You can still tell them we're going FHA, right? It's not trying to hide that you're going FHA. So take that part out of the equation. But what would be a reason why they wouldn't submit that originally?
Oftentimes appraisals, FHA tend to value properties a little bit lower. And so a seller may not be interested in accepting an FHA offer, knowing that the value may come in lower than a conventional deal might.
Correct. And so there's also things on there that say, their earnest money is not hard with the appraisal, all those things, right? So who's dealt with builders? Do builders ever sign the FHA addendum, even though they have accepted an FHA offer? Not until after the appraisal comes back. You'll never see a builder sign it. So they wait till after the appraisal is back and they know that the appraisal is not coming in low before they sign that, because do builders usually give earnest money back? No. So you won't see them sign it. So anyway, that's just something to think about with your FHA offers. And sometimes they know, okay, well, I've accepted this offer, but I still haven't signed that FHA addendum until our appraisal comes back. And so you can talk through that with the sellers, right? Like what you're doing. It's not necessarily something you're hiding or anything like that. It's just a strategy where they don't have to sign that up front, just like builders don't like to. Okay, Pam, multiple offer situation, a conventional offer appears to be stronger. We saw this during COVID. Who was in the business during COVID, right? Nobody wanted to accept FHA or VA offers. Why? Because within 3 months, your property would be significantly higher in value, and now you're stuck with that FHA appraisal. Now you're not stuck with VA appraisals. It's only FHA, just so you guys know that. But for 6 months, that FHA appraisal sticks with the property. Now, the only issue is if you're going FHA on the next one, but somebody, so they're just like, we don't want that stuck. If you're going conventional on the next offer, that's not a problem, right? You can get a conventional appraisal and you're not worried about it. It's just FHA, get an appraisal, then 6 months later, try to do an FHA loan, and now you're stuck with that value. And remember, there was a year when within a year, properties were valued $100,000 more. And so that would be a big deal to your sellers if they're trying to go FHA. So anyway, there are reasons why people are leery about Now VA, what's the term that we talk about with VA when the appraisal is going to come in low?
Tidewater?
Yep, they're gonna email and they're gonna say, okay, we're invoking Tidewater. Now, what's the hard thing about when they do that? Number one, they don't even tell you what the value is. So let's say you're at a 550 and they say we're invoking Tidewater. You don't even know if they're gonna give you a 500 value, a 525 value, a 450 value. Like you have no idea where it's coming in, but you have 48 hours to submit documentation, comps, things like that. They don't usually change it, but I always recommend that you have those comps available when you did your valuation or your CMA on your sellers, on the property when you listed it to get your value. Just have those available so that if you have any issues with appraisals, you can submit those. And the lender's not going to be able to talk to the appraiser. You can't just order a new appraisal just because the value came in low. The only time you can order a new appraisal, which hopefully your lenders are sending the appraisals to you as the buyer's agent so you can look over them and see if there's any mistakes, because if there's a mistake in square footage or missing a bathroom or missing a bedroom, then sometimes we can get a new appraisal ordered. But for the most part, just work with, as a buyer's agent, right? Work with them. Now, be careful as a buyer's agent, you don't have to just go back and say, like, the first thing you're doing if there's Tidewater been invoked, or if the appraisal is coming back low, the first thing you're doing is going back and saying, hey, we want to lower our purchase price as the buyer's agent. What can the sellers do if you come back and say, we want to lower the purchase price? People are scared of this as the buyer's agent. Well, they'll cancel the contract. Can they? No.
Depends on if they signed that amendatory clause.
Okay, well, they can still say they don't want to go down in value, but the clients can't lose their earnest money. But the sellers can still say, nope, we don't want, they're not obligated to go low. The sellers aren't obligated to go lower, but they can't cancel the contract. All they can say is we're not going to go lower. And then, so let's say you're at 410, appraisal comes in at 400. You immediately, as the buyer's agent, you can go back to the seller, we want to lower the purchase price to 400. Appraisal came in at 400, right? They say, no, we're not willing to do that. Okay, now the choices are either the sellers have to bring in $10,000 to bridge that gap, or they can cancel the contract, or the sellers can say, we don't want to do this contract. Even if there's an FHA addendum, that just means up until the end of the contract date, even past settlement, even past F&A, those buyers can't lose their earnest money. But the sellers can still say, we don't want to go to that lower purchase price, and then the contract's gone. Okay, any
Well, the
questions?
agents
Sorry.
can work with each other to try to come to some agreement with lowering commissions, working with the title company, lowering some fees, the lender, blah, blah, blah. I mean, everybody can work together as a team to try to make this deal work. I've unfortunately worked with several agents over the years that won't even discount their commission $10 to make the deal work. They're like, it's either all or nothing. And that's honestly the wrong attitude to have in this business. You're there working for your client, not for your pocketbook.
Thanks, Victor. It does work a lot better on these deals when we're all working together and trying to make the best deal possible for everyone so that everyone can be happy. Thanks. Okay, reasonable care and diligence. An agent is obligated to use reasonable care and diligence. You know what? It's 11 o'clock. Let's do. Well, actually, I'm gonna take a break at 11:10 and then give our second keyword right when we come back at 11:20. So let's talk about this real quick before we take our break. An agent is obligated to use reasonable care and diligence in pursuing the principal's affairs. The standard of care expected of a real estate agent, broker representing a seller or a buyer is that of competent real estate professional. Again, this education, right? You don't come out of class as a real estate agent knowing everything. And even if you've been in the business for 20 years, you don't know everything. So we're always learning. We can always learn from each other. You might come across something you've never seen in real estate. And so, we can help each other, and we always have something to learn. As an agent representing others in their real estate dealings, a broker or salesperson is under a duty to use his superior skill and knowledge while pursuing his principal's affairs. This duty includes an obligation to affirmatively discover facts relating to his principal's affairs that a reasonable and prudent real estate broker would be expected to investigate. Simply put, this is the same duty any professional, such as a doctor or lawyer, owes to his patients or clients. So just a few things like I was talking about. Make sure the doors are locked when you leave a property. Make sure you turn off the lights. Make sure you don't track mud into the home. Take your shoes off. Take good care of the property. I've heard of sometimes people walk in and that nobody's expecting them, or we've talked about in other classes, as you as the buyer's agent, what's your responsibility following your buyer around a home that they're looking at? People have different opinions about that. Making sure that if there's kids there, that you're making sure that the property's safe and you are responsible kind of as following them around in that property. So be super careful with those kinds of things. Okay, any other comments on reasonable care and due diligence? The experience with, let's say, sellers agents who are having buyers agents walk through and not being careful that they want to share?
I had a situation where the kids were jumping on the bed. I was trying to get them to stop, and the parents were looking at me funny. But I'm like, I'm responsible for this place, so you stop it, I'll jerk a knot in your head. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, you are responsible as the buyer's agent walking through to make sure that this property is still owned by the sellers, right? Okay, good point. What about opening cabinets and cupboards and things like that? You're the buyer's agent walking through. What's your rule of thumb?
I would say if it stays with the house, they can open it, but not like a dresser or something. That would be crossing the line.
I would agree. Yeah. So just something to think about, like, kitchen cabinets, you do kind of want to see how they open, if they're soft close, kitchen drawers, things like that, but anything that doesn't stay with the house, nightstands, dressers, things like that. Good point. Okay. It's 11:07. Let's come back at 11:20. And I will give the second keyword right when we come back, so be on time. And then we will end at about 11 or 12:40. So we'll just put our other two breaks together at the end. Okay, we're back. Finish up. Let's have our second word be buyer. Our second word is buyer. Second word is buyer. Okay. We're going to talk about some scenarios now. We're going to go through some newer ones or some older ones. I usually I leave ones from my previous class, and then as new ones come in, I'll put them in too. So there's plenty of scenarios to go through, probably more than we have time to go through. But if you have any scenarios that you want to chat with us about or share with us that could help somebody else, feel free to share. Real estate agent is hired by a client to act in the client's best interest. I know we've said this over and over, can't say it enough, not in their own best interest. Generally, when a real estate agent decides to act for their own personal benefit to the detriment of their client, they've breached the fiduciary duty that they owe to their client. Common examples of real estate agent breach of fiduciary duty: receiving fees or other payments that are not disclosed to the client. For example, if a seller needs to make repairs and improvements to their house before putting it on the market, the agent might receive a kickback from a contractor to get the job. This would be a breach of the agent's fiduciary duty. I'm sure you guys recommend contractors all day long. Just be careful that you're not like recommending somebody who's then giving you money for the job. You sat down at 7:20. The second word's buyer. Sorry, Jared. I know. The second word is buyer. Okay, failing to inform a seller of all offers on the table before an offer has been accepted. Failing to advise a buyer of known material defects in a property. Dual representation. We're going to talk about that again when you can and when you can't. Some brokers I've heard do not even allow it. So check with your broker. But doing that without the consent of both parties and explaining to them that you can't really be for one, you're for both. So there's some things you just have to be neutral on, and they're going to have to take some responsibility too. So making sure they understand what that actually means. Passing a client's personal information to another agent or party to a transaction without the client's knowledge. Sometimes, like, we're in this business, we like always giving our number out. So just be careful that you don't give any information to anybody else without permission. For example, an agent might tell a seller that a buyer has qualified for a loan amount that would allow them to purchase the house at a higher price than the agent's client has offered. Declining or accepting an offer without the client's knowledge and approval. Not upholding client's wishes. An agent should follow their client's legal wishes, such as listing a property at a certain price, selling a property to a relative without telling the client. Again, all these things we've sort of talked about. And some of us, we're looking at this like, well, duh, nobody would do this, but it does happen, and we'll show some scenarios that just recently happened. So just being careful and aware and watching out for yourself and your clients is super important. Okay, so this is in the newsletter. I took out the names. I don't like the idea of having the names there. The actual names are in the newsletter, but I don't like that. Just the idea of seeing what's out there, what people are getting in trouble for, so that we can be careful. Some of it, like you're just not thinking about it. Like, for example, getting in trouble for continuing to advertise something on your website and not taking it down once it's sold, or things like that, that are like, you didn't mean to do something, right? Some of them are just reminders, but so principal broker in Centerville, Utah, this was just in November of 2025, admitted that he represented a buyer in a transaction without a written agency agreement. Okay, so we all know we shouldn't be representing anybody in a buyer or seller capacity without a written agreement. Using an email address that indicated that he was an associate broker of a brokerage, when in reality he was the principal broker of a different brokerage. So be careful what your emails are. If you switch brokerages, change your emails. Admits that his actions are in violation of Utah law, agreed to pay a civil penalty and do education. So a lot of these, that's what's going to happen if you get caught. Now, in my mind, when I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, how many people aren't getting caught, right? The idea of this class is to remind us of what our responsibilities are so that we don't forget and so that we're doing the things that we should be doing. Conway Height in a stipulation ordered This was in August. He admitted that he identified himself as a consultant in a letter of intent, which provided that his company be paid a flat consulting fee of $114,000 in a proposed transaction, that a separate fee be paid to the listing brokerage. He later inquired of the division as to whether he could be paid a fee as a W-2 employee of the buyer, or if he could use a dual power of attorney to get a fee. The buyer later declined to accept the offer. Okay, so basically he's trying to get around the fact that he's no longer a licensed agent, but he wants to receive a fee in the transaction. Okay, so this comes into play. Sometimes you'll hear, sometimes agents are like, can I give a little bit of my commission to my assistant or to my, to people that are working for you, right? And you can't if they're not a licensed agent. So sometimes assistants or TCs will become licensed agents, right? They can do their own transactions. They can also do the transactions for other people. But you can't share any commissions with somebody who's not a licensed agent. So basically he's trying to get around the fact that he's not licensed, but he wants to get a fee from this and trying to figure that out. Usually when you're trying to get around rules, there's a problem just up front with when you're trying to get around things that you should be doing. So I had a guy, this is an interesting thing, and maybe some of you will appreciate it, maybe not, but I wish there was more separation between sellers and buyers, specifically in some transactions where the sellers own the mortgage company or the title company or things like that, right? And there must be ways to get around it, but I had somebody call me to try to get me to move over to their mortgage company. And they seemed pretty legit. I get calls like this quite a bit, but they seem pretty legit. And I was like, okay, well, he's like, well, we can promise you 10 deals a month. We're working with this real estate agent who's super productive. He'll have plenty of deals. You can keep your own deals, and we'll promise you 10 deals from this real estate agent. So I looked him up. He was a legitimate agent, looked like he had quite a bit of volume. And then they said, I said, well, how can that even be possible? You know, I'd be a preferred lender, but still agents can choose to use whoever they want. And he said, well, he owns part of the mortgage company. And I said, well, how do you get around RESPA? There's laws. Like, oh, we have lawyers. So immediately I'm like, okay, I don't want to be any part of this, right? There are ways to get around laws, but in my mind, if you're trying to get around laws, the laws are there for a reason. And so, anyway, there's definitely some gray areas in our business sometimes. And while I like gray in personal life, I don't love gray in business life. Okay. Okay, so he advertised the property for sale without having a written listing agreement. Again, we want to make sure we have a buyer broker with our sellers or our buyers. In addition, after changing brokerages, he continued advertising using the name of his prior brokerage after being notified of the violation by the division. This conduct is a violation of Utah law, so he agreed to pay a civil penalty. So be careful with your advertising. What do we have to do now with our advertising, right? You can't advertise a buyer's agent compensation on the MLS anymore. Where can you advertise it? Where can you advertise what your sellers are giving? Okay, Ashley, on your website.
On your own website?
Okay, but not the brokerage website, right?
No, like your own
Right.
website.
Right. So
And
I just want to go ahead.
If it has an IDX feed that feeds right from the MLS, you can't advertise either, right?
Right. So you want to be careful, right, that you have no connection to the MLS when you're advertising a buyer agent commission. So
I have a question on this, Eden.
Yeah.
That I've asked my broker, and he's like, oh, it's kind of a gray area. What about if I have a listing and I'm doing a listing marketing video and I'm not pinning the actual MLS, I'm just posting pictures with the numbers. Am I able to market that on like a social media ad?
I guess I don't know that for sure. Does anybody know? Gordon, do you know that?
I don't know, but I think on social media, don't you have to have your brokerage name?
Yeah, you have to like have it listed like as with your brokerage logo. But she's saying, can you advertise the buyer broker compensation?
You can.
Okay, thanks, John. So it's not on the MLS, but on your personal stuff. So even on social media where it's going out to everybody. Okay. So there are ways for you to advertise what the sellers are willing to give as a buyer agent commission. You just have to be careful. They brought up in our training too that we need to be super careful about AI. In some people are starting to use AI on their websites where you can type in a question and things like that. Just be careful that AI isn't giving any information that they're not licensed to give. So that's coming up at some point. We're going to have, like they can't give, like on my website, for example, I couldn't have AI giving rates or things like that. It's not a licensed agent, so or a licensed loan officer. So I don't know what's going to happen with AI, but just be a little bit cautious with AI when you're using it to give information to your buyers.
Work a lot with AI right now and looking into chatbots. A lot of companies are getting sued from the chatbots disclosing, like it's prevalent in Florida. A woman's made a career out of it at this point. I would say the liability is super high risk for how early this technology is. So to deploy it, I would just say very, very risky.
Thanks, Jared. I appreciate that. That they talked a lot about that in the meeting for our, when we went and met with them about teaching this class, that you do need to be really careful with it. It's so new and there are lots of rules about disclosure. So if you're related, if it's on your website and things like that, you could be liable. So be super careful. In a stipulation ordered in November, she admitted that she violated Utah law and administrative rules in two separate scenarios. In the first matter, she admitted that she acted without the requisite competence while representing a buyer in a failed transaction. She previously represented a person who agreed to pay large amounts of earnest money in two separate failed property transactions. When you're the buyer's agent, are you having conversations about how much earnest money is appropriate in a situation? Just think about, like be careful, right? Like back in COVID days, people were saying that earnest money went hard upon acceptance. There was lots of stuff like that. Then, that's when we started talking about FHA addendums, right? Again, FHA was hard to get under contract for those kind of reasons. But make sure your buyers understand what they're agreeing to when they either put down a lot of money for earnest money or make their earnest money go hard at certain circumstances. Make sure they understand. This former client later contacted the agent and asked if she had any clients who might benefit from secondary financing. Her former client used a fictitious name. So, right, they're putting down a ton of money and then they're failed transactions. And then they contact her again and say, do you know anybody who could benefit from something I'm doing? But he'd used a fictitious name and had an extensive criminal record and a history of fraud. But notwithstanding the failed transactions, she facilitated the personal loan agreement using her DocuSign account. The former client failed to deliver the promised funds, and the new client, the buyer in the proposed transaction, lost her earnest money. So now this person is paid, they paid their earnest money, right? It says that in there. But in the second scenario, she posted advertisements of her listing. The division located 8 advertisements that had expired, reflected her previous brokerage, or advertised a property that had been sold. Make sure you know the rules about advertising, right? First and foremost, your current brokerage, right? If you're no longer with them, take everything down that has the brokerage logo on it. You're no longer with them anymore. Make sure you keep your websites up to date. If it's sold, make sure it shows sold. Make sure you're not advertising properties that are already sold without consent of the sellers or of the new buyers who own it. Make sure that you're not advertising anything that's not actually for sale. Why do agents want to do that? What's the incentive? It happens a lot. You'll see that a lot as one of the problems. You're advertising something that's already sold or not for sale anymore, and they get in trouble for it a lot. So what's the incentive there?
Try to get buyers.
Right. So it's kind of like um, anybody advertising something in the lending world. I compare it to a grant that almost nobody qualifies for, right? But you want to get them in, right? And that looks really awesome. And so they come and talk to you. No, they don't qualify for this, but you have them talking to you now. So in the lending world, that's not illegal, right? In the real estate world, if it's not for sale and you're advertising it for sale, you're going to be in trouble, and you have to be super careful.
It's bait and switch.
Say that again, John.
In used car salesmen, they call it bait and switch.
Thank you. Yeah, bait and switch. Okay. So be careful. There are rules about it. No, there are things you can do, right? But just be careful that you know the rules about advertising. And one of the biggest ones is not advertising something that's not actually for sale, and not advertising something that you don't have permission to advertise. So we've had circumstances where people go in and do a video, right, of somebody else's listing and then post it and things like that. Sometimes we've had situations where they're saying things about the listing that are derogatory. You have to have permission from the listing agent, not only the listing agent, but the sellers, to do things like that. So be careful you have the appropriate permission when you're doing things like that. So, okay, let's go to any other situations that you guys want to. Have you ever had any experience with that? Do you find that people are posting your listings without your permission or without the seller's permission? Or do you feel like people are pretty good about that right now? Any other situations you want to share with everybody?
I have reported it, but nothing happened with it. It was very frustrating in the sense that I had a listing for sale in a cul-de-sac, and a house two houses over, the realtor placed his sign in the yard, and it was not listed on the MLS. And he had it up for the long period of time. I can't remember the period of time you're allowed to put a sign up before it has to hit the MLS. And so I reported it multiple times, but the sign stayed up. He was stealing my potential buyers because they could call his number because he was in the middle of flipping it. He was taking my traffic to try to sell his house, and it was very frustrating. Nothing ever happened of it either. So
It's 5 days. It's 5 days that they have to have it listed in the MLS.
Yeah, and he didn't.
I actually am a new realtor, and I just got this violation because I'm listing my own house, and I was getting the pictures done, and I put the sign out there after the pictures because she said the pictures would be done that night, and she never got them to me. When the board of realtors called me and told me I was in violation, they said you have one business day to get it listed on the MLS, even if you put an active no showings, but you only have one business day to put it on the MLS unless that lands on like a holiday or like a long weekend or something. But they told me I only had one business day to list it on the MLS, or they would move forward with my violation.
Thanks
Good to know.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to that guy because I looked on the MLS many different because I was irritated because it was during a peak time when I don't know. I was just very frustrated that no matter what I did, he continued to have the sign nowhere on the MLS, not even on active, not even like as canceled, nowhere. And what's the fine for that? Because I see all these people are getting violations.
It's a lot. It's like thousands of dollars. But she said that there is an option that you can select it to basically be like active no listing and no showings, so that like not everybody can see it and nobody will be able to click showings on it, and the days actually don't accrue on the active MLS. However, the board can see it, and so that they know you're selling it. And I think you have like a while, like you can have that. I think she said like 60 days or something like that. But they were on top of it for me. They called me like I had put my sign up on Thursday, and by Monday they were calling me telling me that over the weekend a realtor drove by and took a picture of it and turned me in. And I said, "Can I just take my sign down then, because I don't have my pictures yet?" And she was like, "Nope, you have to list it." She was like, "If you just take," she goes, "the violation's already been open."
Oh, interesting. So
So
once you
if
have the
the
sign up,
agent, if I can answer the question, the agent could be not member of the board and be a real estate agent. then that
Yeah.
doesn't apply the rules and regulation we have as a
Right.
member of the board. So somebody can put a sign on the property and be a real estate agent, but not member of the MLS. So
Yeah, they're
that
not a
could be the
realtor, they're a real
case.
estate agent. Yeah.
That's an interesting
Sure.
idea too. Okay, thanks, John.
Eden, and another thought on that
Yeah,
is,
please.
can you not, in a contract with a seller, can they not request that it not be put on the MLS? And write that into the terms of your listing agreement? I've
No,
known
I think when you're on the board, you can do like an office exclusive so that you can basically have your listing exclusive just to your brokerage, but you cannot promote it to the public without it being on the MLS.
There is a listing for office listing on the form on the MLS. You can take a look at it.
Roger's saying there's a separate document to keep it off the MLS.
There is, you can do a certification of exempt property listing where you fill out the paperwork to get it on the MLS, you load it, but then you have them fill out the certification of exempt, and that you can do that for a long, you can do it for quite a while. But what happens is when an agent's doing a search, they can see the property on the MLS, but the public can't. And then once the property's ready to actually go live, it starts on day one and has not accrued any time. So we do this a lot in the Park City area where some homes are unavailable because the roads aren't plowed, but they're still available, but not to the public.
So Pam, then if you keep it off the MLS, it's not accruing days, but the
Right.
agents can see it, then Mallory should have been able to see it if that's what that guy did.
If he
Yeah,
was a
that's
realtor,
true.
If he was a
Yeah.
realtor.
not just a real estate agent.
Yep. Okay. Good
So,
comment.
do we have brokers online today in the class, Eden?
Yeah, Jean Shoei is a broker.
Okay, so is there never an instance, John, where you can't or where you can not list it on the MLS for somebody if a seller really doesn't want it on the MLS? I mean, I know that's unusual. It doesn't happen very often because if you really want to sell a property, you want it out there where everybody can see it. I'm just curious because it seems to me like there ought to be a way for people if they really didn't want it to be on the MLS. I know there are strange things where people don't want to sign out and they're just really, people are unique. So
That's why we have an addendum to the listing agreement. If that's what the seller will tell you to do, you just have to fill that on that addendum to the exclusive right to sell agreement and clarify that on the addendum what they want you to do. It have to be documented. So that's the way. Sometimes we get a listing only in our office, and or they may say we want to have it for 3 weeks in your office and then put it on the market, whatever you agreed to do, but you cannot put a sign on their yard. Once you put a sign in their yard, then you're putting yourself, you have to advertise it to the public.
Okay,
There's
so
a
that's the
difference.
clarification then, is that once you put the sign in the yard, like Mallory was saying the guy did, then it should have been listed.
No,
Unless the guy is not a member of the board, then
Oh,
he
yeah.
can put a sign and not be the member of the board. There are, I think, about few hundred agents. They are active agents as far as the Utah.gov know about it, but they're not member of the board, and they can put a sign in their yard without listing it on anywhere. They cannot put it on the MLS because not member.
Maybe they're a member of a different MLS.
Yeah, there are different rules here. There's the law, the real estate law, and there are MLS and board rules. And so the answer to this depends on what MLS and what board you're talking about. Because
Utah real estate has different rules than the Park City MLS has. And there is an ability to have a property listed and not advertise it on the MLS, but there are forms for both MLSs that you have to fill out in order to do so.
Thanks, Lynn.
And
So
guys,
real-
for clarifying on that, I appreciate it.
yeah, just real quickly, if you're a member of the board, it's more than just putting a sign in the yard. That includes flyers, digital marketing on public websites, brokerage websites. I mean, it's any kind of advertising. If you start doing that, you have to have it on the MLS within 1 business day.
Thanks, Matt.
Clear cooperation rules several years back did allow, and I think they still do, that if you're in the active no-show status, you can have a sign in the yard, but you cannot do any other advertising until you put it in the active status.
I just wanted to point out one thing. I also had that happen to me 3 or 4 years ago. I had a listing. I did it on a Friday, called the sign company. I mentioned to them that I've got a new listing and if I could get it sign up by Monday because the people are cleaning and over the weekend and they'd be ready on Monday. I got a call and a notice from the Salt Lake board saying that you have a sign up and it's not listed. And I said, I'm not aware of that. And I had a picture they showed from another agent, drove by and took a picture and noticed it wasn't listed on the MLS. It wasn't going to be until Monday. But the sign company jumped and got it up there quicker. And I got a fine. There was nothing I could do about it. They didn't care. There's a sign and there's a fine. So be careful when you're ordering your signs. Make sure your sign's up when the listing's active.
Wow, thanks, Brad.
Yeah.
That was probably really frustrating.
Can I ask kind of a similar topic, but kind of different question? I am both a real estate agent and the owner of a construction company where I build and develop custom homes and some other things as well. But as long as I don't, if I want to list a building for sale, but I don't want to attract agents or whatever for the short term while it's in the preliminary phases and not under construction, I can put a builder as a builder myself. I can list and market it myself without being on the MLS. But the second that I want to put it on the MLS, I have to put up my real estate logo and those other things as well. Does anybody have any input or comments on that?
Builders are not held to the realtor standard. So you'll see a lot of the different things that builders can do.
But if you're a real estate agent and you're a member of the board, then that will put you on the gray area. You cannot offer any compensation to the buyer agent. Be one of those mean builders.
Well, yes and no, but yeah, I hear you. If an agent came to me and said, "Hey, I want to buy this property," I'm not going to turn away business. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to offer. I've been a new home salesperson for a long time, and realtors are the lifeblood of any builder. So I wouldn't ever kick an offer like that away. Realtors are my friends. I just like doing both.
Yeah, sure. And you can, right? So the point is that, like, in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, but as a builder, you can do different things than you can as a realtor, but you're both, right? So you just have to be careful.
Yeah, it's a big gray area.
Hey, Eden, I had a situation where I was advertising a property and I had some kids or someone that kept taking my sign and throwing it in the weeds. So I kept finding my sign not being visible. So where does that come into play for? I didn't get fined or anything, but where does that come into play?
So if somebody keeps throwing I mean, technically, right, that's like a legal thing. Some kids are just playing games with you and throwing your sign
Right.
away. But yeah, once it's set up, whether somebody's taking it down and throwing it away, that's when your 1 day starts, right? And then you got to list it. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be
John,
fined.
John, as long as you're on the MLS, you don't have to have a sign in the yard.
Oh, okay.
You just can't do the opposite.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Well,
Okay.
I had it on the MLS. So
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Matt, for clarifying that. I wasn't sure what you're asking. Barbara's asking, can it be listed as land available showing possible builds on the land? Barbara, do you want to clarify what you're asking? Is this for Casey?
Yes, that was for Casey. I wasn't sure since he's both an agent and a builder, if you could advertise the land, without having a building on it.
As an agent, I definitely can. So I actually have a draft of a listing thing where it's like I'm willing to list the lot for like $300,000, and a buyer's agent can do that. I haven't pulled the trigger on that yet, but it's sitting there. I'm just waiting for financing. So we'll see. But yeah, I can do that. I can do both, but yes, I can do that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, John Shoei just gave me our third word, sign.
SIGN, sign.
Sorry.
Sign, SIN, SIGN.
Yes, SIGN. And then I won't give the fourth or fifth word until the end, probably around 12:40-ish or something, just because you only have 4 words and then people jump off, right? And we're supposed to stay the whole time. So anyway, just know that fourth and fifth word are coming. Okay. So this was in St. George in October, admitted that he took a video of a property listed with a broker with whom he was not affiliated and without the broker's permission. So again, if you take videos of anybody's listing, make sure you have their permission. Later, after the listing had been canceled, he participated in a television interview noting details about the owner and giving the impression that he was the listing agent. He then posted the video of the interview in his Instagram account. The owner of the property later listed with another broker and sold the property. Even after the property had been sold, he continued to market the property for sale on Instagram and Facebook without a listing agreement. Also marketed 5 other properties for which he no longer had listings after the listings had expired and sold. So again, make sure you have an agreement before you're marketing properties. Make sure you're listed on the MLS if you put signs or do other marketing. Talk to your broker if you have any questions. That's part of the learning process, especially if you're a new agent, is right. You have a broker who can help you. You have mentors who can help you. Make sure you know the rules before you do any kind of marketing. And some of these people probably know the rules, they just don't follow them, right? Okay, let's move on a little bit. We've got still a lot of other scenarios we can talk about, but let's move on a little bit and we'll come back to those if we have time. I wanted to go over. Okay, here's our advertising without permission, just so you kind of know. This is the lead investigator, Laurel. We've seen a concerning trend in complaints where a non-listing sales agent advertises a property using videos or photos of property without permission from the listing agent or property owner in order to promote themselves and their services. We talked about why you'd want to do that, right? Bait and switch or getting buyers. Let me illustrate using 3 simple examples. First, a buyer's agent makes an appointment to show a client a property for sale. The agent shows up at the property with a film crew, no client, and proceeds to guide the film crew through the property as they shoot a personal promotional video on behalf of the buyer's agent. Now, some newer agents are like marketing or doing open houses for other agents, right? But you need to make sure that you let people know that you are not the listing agent, right? And so, but
you have to let the seller knows as well.
Thank you, John, for clarifying that too. So yeah, like I'm having this open house for you. Another agent's going to be there. Like we're making sure everybody knows what's going on. The complaint alleged that the buyer's agent invaded the property owner's privacy, gained access to the property under false pretenses they didn't have a buyer, and left camera crew workers unsupervised inside the house. We talked about that again, like you are responsible as an agent when you go inside a house. Number one, you should have a buyer if you're going to look at a property, but then also not leaving people alone unsupervised. Can you go see a property without a buyer? Sure.
That's what you request and disclose. It's just you.
Sure. Disclosure, right? So you're letting them know I'm going without a buyer, or my buyer can't be here. Can I do a video or something with, can I do a video to send to my buyer, right? And then you're getting that written permission so that later you can say, I only sent it to this person, or right, if it gets sent out somewhere else. Anyway, whatever they say that you can do, but you're getting permission. There are lots of people who aren't in person to go see a house, right? And you're doing a FaceTime with them, showing them properties. So Samuel says one thing about the person who has their own property for sale. I believe if you are using signage to advertise your property, it needs to say owner agent on the sign or similar language. Correct, right? So if you're selling your own property, you need to make sure that it says that you are an owner agent and that it's your own property. What about if you're a broker? Let's say Jean Showy has a property that he owns and somebody from his brokerage wants to bring a buyer.
I wouldn't let them.
Okay, so there are some instances when you have to be careful, right? Because then now all of a sudden he's selling his own property, he's the broker on this property, and he's also the buyer's agent because technically the broker is the buyer's agent too, right? And it's listed under the broker. So there are some times to be careful. Okay, second, a buyer's agent makes an appointment to show a client a property for sale. Shortly after the showing, the listing agent found a video posted on social media showing the buyer's agent, no client, walking through the property using derogatory language as the condition of the property. This video was reposted by other viewers to expand the damaging remarks exponentially. Be super careful with social media. Third, a sales agent personally secured a purchase agreement from a property owner that allows assignability. The property owner was represented by a listing agent. The sales agent, in order to advertise the availability of this assignable contract, used the listing agent's photo from the MLS on marketing brochures and email blasted without permission. So again, make sure you have permission from wherever you're doing from, not only the seller's agent, but also the sellers. Okay.
If I can add something, so if
Please.
you go show a property as a buyer agent, you may want to let your buyers know there may be some cameras, so please do not make any negative or positive comments when we are in the property is not the best thing. So I got few calls from the seller. They had a camera and they were complaining about the comment the other agent or the buyer made on the property.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Karen, earlier, right before the break, she said etiquette for showing should be gone over with the buyers before you take them out. So when you have buyers, make sure you have that showing etiquette and let them know cameras are everywhere. And be careful what you say. Positive or negative, like John said, it's not just the negative stuff, right? You don't want to give away your position or how much you love the property or anything that might give you the lower hand on the deal when you're doing that. Does somebody want to comment something else? Sorry, I heard somebody. Okay.
I think I just said I agree.
Oh, thanks. Okay. The following acts are unlawful and grounds for disciplinary action: making a false representation or promise through an agent, advertising availability of real estate or services, false, misleading, or deceptive. We talked about most of these things. You may not engage in any of the practices described above. Fail to conform with accepted standards of real estate leasing or management industries, could jeopardize the public health, safety, or welfare. There are circumstances where you can use property photos allowed by your IDX agreement, but check with your local multiple listing service to understand the terms of usage. If you'd like to help advertise a property as a buyer's agent using photos or videos from the listing agent, ask for permission to use their media. Security or cameras are here to stay, just like Jean said. Always conduct yourselves professionally. If you have an appointment to show a property to a client, bring a client. If your client fails to show up for that appointment and you want to view the property personally, communicate that change with the listing agent or seller and get their approval before you proceed. If you don't have a client and want to make a personal promotional video while inside the property to help advertise its availability, ask the property owner. They might just say yes. Okay. Let's talk about the newsletter, some of the updates and things that they're going over in the newsletter. It's a good idea to read these when they come out. You'll find updates and things that they're going over, things that they're going to try to push through, new changes in real estate laws, things like that are always in here. Property management was something they talked a lot about in our meeting this year when they were going over the residential real estate class of teachers. So watch for things about property management. They're trying to push through different things with HOAs. If you go, I didn't put it in here, but if you go and read the newsletter from the end of the year, talks a lot about HOAs and how they're trying to get some sort of coverage over HOAs because I don't know how many of you have had problems when you're trying to buy or sell an HOA property. Sometimes it can be really difficult to get the information that you need. Sometimes they don't answer their phone. Sometimes it's hard to find out who's responsible for it. So they're trying to help with those problems, and it may be a while, but in 2025, there was a new bill, House Bill 337, and a passage of a House bill, but this bill clarified that an individual licensed as a principal broker, associate broker, sales agent, or property manager, it just talks about licenses. So you're going to have a new license for a property manager that's going to be coming out. So just make sure this is going into effect in July of this year. But just read through the newsletter if you are a property manager or want to know some of the stuff that's coming out with this. Read through all the information they have in there about HOAs and sources and places you can look to get help for those kinds of things.
Eden, last year there was a proposal to do mandatory licensing and mandatory education for the boards, and it just barely did not pass. Did they change that? That would be wonderful.
I don't know that, I guess. I just went off the letter. I mean the fourth quarter newsletter. So we'll have to see when first quarter comes out.
Yeah, that if they were licensed, we could hold them accountable to get the information, especially on HOAs. It can be very difficult to get a lot of the information financially from them.
Right, and it causes problems with loans a lot. So yeah, so we have that problem on our side too. So thank you for commenting on that. So when the first quarter newsletter comes out, go in and read about that because it sounds like it may not have passed, which is too bad. Okay, thanks, Gordon.
Are they going to try again to force that, or what's the process so far? I'm curious.
I don't know that, Gordon. Do you know?
I have not heard. I think it would be wonderful to have the DRE involved.
Sure.
Because they've got some teeth. I mean, historically, there's been no type of, it's like the Wild West within the HOAs.
Which is exactly what they were talking about in our meetings, that there's no accountability at all.
Zero. I mean, they're required to keep all of their minutes and all of their financials for 3 years. How many HOAs actually have current minutes within the last year?
Right. Right. So in the newsletter, it says, how do I get those ampersand, all the little symbols, right? HOA documents. But basically it has a lot of things, who's responsible. So it gives information, but you're right, we don't know about that non-passing because this was probably before that happened, Gordon. Okay, well, I'll watch for the newsletter too, and you guys watch for it when it comes out and read about that. Hopefully there'll be something in there that will talk about that again. In the newsletter, it talked about cybersecurity. So be super careful about solicitations, right? There's been problems, and maybe you guys have seen them and heard about them, but somebody sends a request for a Zoom meeting, and they provide you with a link that's not legit, and then when you click on it, it exposes your system to malware, and it's going out to a lot of agents. So just be super careful about that. If you haven't heard about that, don't click on any Zoom links. You don't know who they came from.
Happened to me and my partner. We
Did
got
it?
we got a link. Yeah, so we never clicked it. We didn't do anything. We
Oh,
knew,
good. Oh,
but it
good.
was out there, and they were just persistent, remote. Just click the link. Just open
Right.
the PDF. Something.
Right. Well, and Jared, you probably know with AI that a lot of that stuff can go out pretty fast into a lot of people. So,
Oh yeah. So they're spamming it, and then they're searching. As soon as you click on it, it gives them full remote access to your device, which has all your security keys, and they're looking for exchange information for investing, like
mm,
crypto, and they'll siphon it out immediately, and it's gone.
wow. So be
I'm
super
I'm
careful.
actually cybersecurity certified. I did 20 years of IT before I got going with real estate.
Oh, cool.
The biggest things you want to do is check the email address that it comes from. A lot of times they're going to say something like microsoft.somewebsite.com. So it looks like it's Microsoft, but it's not really Microsoft. So check the email address, make sure it's a legitimate email address. And if it isn't something that you were expecting, don't open it. If it's from a name you recognize, you might want to even call that person and ask them if they sent it, if it's something that's suspicious to you.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, I don't click on anything anymore unless I double check it. And if I'm not expecting it, we have a lot of problems with title stuff, right? But if you hover over the sender's email, it doesn't say title in their email. And so that's always one good way to check. Julie said she got a text one about that Zoom meeting. Was it a Zoom meeting too? So be careful. Want you guys to stay safe. It said that he and his wife wanted to talk Zoom about the property we had up for sale. So be really careful. Charitable donations, I want to go over this because it was in the newsletter. So they're getting a lot of questions still about rules about charitable donations and inducements. Um, the division frequently receives inquiries regarding charitable donation incentives. Specifically, licensees often ask if they may advertise that a donation will be made to a school, PTA, or charity upon the completion of a real estate transaction. What do you guys think? What's the answer?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Anybody think you can't? Let's talk about it. Okay, inducements to a third party states that an inducement gift is permissible and is not an illegal sharing of commission if the principal broker or affiliated licensee offering the inducement gift to a buyer or seller complies with the underwriting guidelines that apply to any loan in the transaction for which the inducement has been offered. An inducement gift may be offered only to the client, buyer, or seller without it being an illegal sharing of commission, provided there's compliance with underwriting guidelines. So you can offer to your seller or your buyer anything you want. You can offer free TV if they list with you. You can offer them a trip to Hawaii. You can offer them part of your commission. You can offer them anything to induce them to list with you.
Isn't
Okay.
there a dollar cap?
Yeah. So we're not talking about the 250 one in this case. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you could give all your commission to somebody if you wanted to, as long as it follows the underwriting guidelines. Okay. But we'll talk about that caveat with the 250 cap in a minute. So, however, when an inducement is being offered to a third party, like we were talking about a charity or PTA, rather than the client, it constitutes an illegal sharing of commission. Consequently, the real estate licensee would be in violation of the code. Okay. So you actually can't say, okay, if you list with me, then I will give a charity of your choice so much money. Okay. But you can give a buyer or a seller whatever you want. Okay, the underwriting constraint, even if the inducement is paid directly to a client, it could be in violation of the inducement if the underwriting guidelines of any loan involved in the transaction. So in both the third party and compliant inducement scenarios, the licensee could face agency action against their lend. So what are the rules about giving your commission? What are the limits for lending? Both, anybody who's involved in the transaction, right? You or the sellers. So the real estate agent or the sellers are limited by what? Don Shoei says 5. What does that mean? Percent?
Yes, 5% for the buyer agent.
Are you talking about the buyer agent compensation?
Correct. That's
Okay.
that's the new law.
Okay. So, but if you want to give somebody something and we're talking about underwriting issues, what are you limited to? There's a percentage. So let's say you're doing a conventional loan. What's the limit for seller compensation and agent compensation in the deal? 3% on conventional, primary home. So the total amount, 3% of the purchase price, let's say you have a $100,000 loan purchase price, right? We wish. $100,000 purchase price, you can give up to 3% as the agent, but that includes what the sellers are giving. Okay. Now, if you're putting 10% down or more, you can go up to 6%, and then government loans are 6%. The only other limitation is 2% on a conventional investment property. Okay, so interested parties are the agent and the sellers, and that's their limit. So that's the limit that you can give, right? So if the sellers are already giving something. Now, what about all these condos? I think there was some condos that one of the builders was giving 9%. Seller, what happens there? What do we do? It's obviously over what the lenders allow. So what are they doing? Who's done one of those?
Could some of that go to design upgrades?
Not necessarily, right? Because that's still giving them towards closing costs, but only 3% if they're putting down less than 10%, or 6% maybe if they're an FHA loan. So where does the rest of that money go?
Maybe for the buy down?
They still can't do the buy down because you're still limited.
Oh,
It'd be for discounting the purchase price.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, so that's the only other thing, right? So if you've maxed out your 6% on a government loan, or your 3% on the conventional loan, or 6% if you have enough down, then the only thing that those seller concessions can go towards is buying down or lowering the purchase price. So I've seen that a couple times where the agent will ask for more than what we can allow, and then that's why it's nice to have in the contract as lenders that it can go towards a buy down, closing costs, or lowering the purchase price. And then we don't have to worry about that being a possibility or get the sellers to sign something else to be able to do that. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so just know that there's limits. And then let's talk about, Mallory talked about, let's see if it's on this page. Sometimes after receiving the above response, licensees ask, can I give the inducement to the client who will then pay it to the charity? So we're still talking about third party. No, this is also a violation of administrative rules. But the permitted activity, if you want to give money to a charity, a real estate professional is free to donate to a charity after they receive their commission. Okay, that's entirely up to the licensee. However, they simply cannot advertise this fact to induce clients or businesses to refer clients to the agent. So again, what Mallory's referring to is the kind of referral system. So, right, you can't ask for referrals. You can't solicit referrals and then give compensation. So there is a limit to a referral source. If somebody refers somebody to you, you can give them up to $250 in compensation, gift cards or other things. But you can't say to them before they refer to you, I'll give you $250 if you refer somebody, because that's a solicited referral. So you can't give anything for a solicited referral. So you might say to your clients, refer your friends and family to me. And then later you give them a $250 gift card. But you didn't initially say, if you refer people to me, I'll give you a $250 gift card. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah, I just remember like it's probably like 10 years ago, a realtor posted that like looking for new buyers, I'll get you a new TV or I'll put this much towards your closing costs. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should do that. So I brought it up to my broker and he looked into it and he said, you can go up to this amount. So I was just going off of memory of something where if you market yourself to provide, then you're going to give somebody something that you have to make sure it's within a certain threshold. So from my understanding, it's not that anymore.
So it is still, but only if you're asking for referrals, not if you're asking for clients. Right? So there's two different things. Like you can give your client whatever you want as an inducement to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't ask somebody to give you a client.
No, yeah, it was a closing gift. Like you will provide if you purchase a home with me as your realtor, you'd get a TV or something like
Yeah,
that. That's what the
you
advertisement was.
yeah, you
And so I
can
was
do
like,
that.
oh, well, that's reasonable. I could take that out of a chunk of my commission
Mhm.
to get someone a TV. But when he looked, it was like 10 years ago. So that's why I thought
Oh,
there was
so
a
maybe it's changed. That's before my
yeah.
time, but yeah, you can do that now. But the only limit is solicited referrals. Um, okay, let's see. Can you say you'll give a nice gift without saying what it is? No, technically not, because that has some value associated with it. So no solicited gifts of any kind, not even a penny. Um, and same with lenders, right? I can't ask you to send me deals for a fee. What about giving clients access to your trade discounts to buy furniture, etc. once the deal has closed? You can do that with your clients, right? But not as a perk for soliciting referrals. What's the limitation? Maybe just what is deductible on your taxes? Um, so you can give up to $250 for a referral that's unsolicited. But you can give as much of your commission away as you want. What's the limitation on that?
You can buy him a Ferrari if you want to.
So your broker has to send me a letter as the lender that says it's okay. So Jean Shoei, if I'm working with one of his buyer agents and they're giving their commission, I have to get a letter from Jean that says it's okay for them to gift that money to the buyers. So they just have to okay it. I know a realtor who made a post saying she's giving all her clients a Christmas tree during the holiday season. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, totally okay. You're talking clients versus referral sources, and that's the difference. Okay. Um,
Is there an addendum or something for the commissions?
so you can do it that way. I've seen it done both ways. If you're giving
Yeah.
commissions, you can just write it as an addendum to your BAC, your buyer broker agreement that says you're giving him that money, and then you send that to the lender because the broker has to sign that. And they have to do that anyway, or you can get a separate letter from the broker too. I've done it both ways. Okay, what needs to be signed for a licensee to represent another person? We've talked about this. You need to have and everything needs to be in writing. Owner of the property needs to sign, right? That's a seller one. And you have to confirm agency before you have a Rep C or any kind of disclosure. So make sure you're getting the correct document signed to show properties, to list with people, and make sure when you're doing your listings that you're checking who actually owns the property. We had a deal that was almost to closing before we realized that the person who signed all the whole Rep C was not the agent on the trust. So make sure if the property's in a trust that you know and have seen the trust documents or title seen the trust documents, somebody knows that the person who you're dealing with and signing your Rep C is actually allowed to sign the Rep C. Okay, so you guys have seen this. I'm not going to go over that. We're kind of getting, we only have about 20 minutes left. Lots of people have gotten in trouble over not getting their correct document signed. Okay, limited agency. Let's talk about this a little bit. Any brokers even allow limited agency? Jean, do you allow any of your agents to do limited agency?
I allow, but I don't like it. I tell them don't do it because it opens a liability, especially when there are two different agents from the same brokerage and the same office. That will always, at that moment when the transaction go through is fine, but later on can come back and then you have to go to the court and figure things out.
So I'm just curious, do you talk through it in those situations about the risks and then you let them decide? Because what he's saying is that any two agents in the same brokerage, it is limited agency, even though there's a buyer's and a seller's agency because they're both under the same brokerage.
Well, in the last 22 years, we may have 3 limited agencies, so that's the extended of, and we get sure we disclose, we have the proper limited agency disclosure form signed, and so on and so forth, but it still will create, I rather not, so if I have a listing, I rather not to do the limited agency and do a non-represented buyer rather than be a limited agent.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So keep that in mind when you're in those situations. Because sometimes you'll have a buyer come to your, unrepresented to your listing, and they just know that, okay, maybe they're trying to get a deal or whatever, but then you say, well, okay, you're taking responsibility for you. I'm taking responsibility for my seller still.
Yeah, now there is a place on the exclusive right to sell agreement which shows and disclosed if the buyer will arrive to the property with no representation, how much you will charge extra for doing the work. So,
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that. So then you've already decided what's going to happen when that unrepresented buyer comes. That's great. So be really careful with this. I know that you've heard a lot about this, but there are certain circumstances where I feel like it might make sense. Be aware that your lender too. Make sure you talk to your lender about, don't tell me things that I shouldn't know, right? Because lenders are usually, and I've had agents when they're in a limited agency situation where they're really good about it, and I try to be super careful myself. Because now usually when I'm doing a loan for somebody, I have no dealings really with the seller side. I'm just dealing with the buyer side. But in a limited agency situation, now I'm dealing with the sellers and the buyer side as the agent. So I need to be careful that I'm talking to my buyer, the person who's actually getting the loan, before I send out the appraisal, before I send, right? Like that you would normally do when you have both people. And so they're the seller side and the buyer side. So you need to make sure that your lender is careful with that too. So in this case, this is a little while ago, but he agreed to represent as a limited agent both the buyer and the seller in a property transaction. The seller was an entity owned and operated by himself, right? So not only is a limited agency, but he's actually the seller. However, Utah Administrative Code prohibits a licensee from acting as a limited agent in a transaction which the licensee is either the buyer or the seller. Okay, so those are the times when you absolutely can't do it. And this comes into play when, like, John Shoei, if he's the broker, lists his own house, and then one of his buyer agents from his brokerage comes as the buyer. Okay, that becomes a limited agent situation where you absolutely can't do it. And so you need to have that buyer, if that's the property they really want, then you have to have that buyer go and get you're referring that buyer to somebody else, and then that agent could possibly get a referral fee, but you can't keep it in that situation. Okay.
I strongly suggest to get the agent. I won't do it even as a non-represented buyer in that case. I rather pay the commission than getting sued later on. So I don't. If I have any interest on the property, I don't want to be any way as far as the agency goes to attach to the buyer.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's great. Okay, I know a realtor, Brittany says, I know a realtor who made a post saying she's giving all her clients, oh, we already read that. Her entire SOA or just current clients? Oh, he's asking you. Okay, I won't worry about that. How do licensees enter into limited agency? We've talked about this a little bit. You have to have the disclosures. You have to make sure that they understand what that means. So both parties, right, the seller and the buyer, understand what that means, because you're not going to be able to give them, you have to be neutral. So you can't be 100% on either side. And so they're not going to get what they would get if they had their own personal agent. So they just need to understand that when they're signing that. And be careful when you have people sign something. It's your responsibility to make sure they understand what they're signing to, not just that you get them to sign it. Your responsibility and obligations, neutrality, obedience, while being neutral. That can be super hard, which is why a lot of brokerages don't like it and don't recommend it. Holding safe the money, anything else created by the written agreement. So just make sure you're super careful in those situations. Here's a limited agency consent agreement. Make sure that they understand exactly what they're signing. Let's go over some real estate contract things. We only have about 15 minutes. So let's kind of go over these. There is this UAR hotline. If you don't know about it, just take a quick picture of this. It can be super helpful if you have any questions or you're concerned about things or getting answers to things. This hotline is only available to members of the Utah Association of Realtors, but there's one of the guys, I've taken classes from one of the lawyers on there, super nice, and they'll help you and answer questions. And so utilize that, that's available to you. Let's talk about earnest money a little bit more. We talked about it a little bit before, but we talked about the title thing. You're in breach. And I actually, in one of our trainings, they had a newer agent who didn't use the title addendum. It was during the time when rate, properties were appreciating super fast and they got another offer and wanted to accept it, and they went back and they did not have the addendum for the title company, and so the buyers were in breach and they accepted the other contract, and his buyers were in a moving van ready to move in. So be super careful with things like that. There's lots of things to learn, but make sure you understand, all the things that you're doing and you're submitting the correct documentation. Check with your broker if you're not sure. And then again, we talked about you have 4 days to submit your earnest money to the brokerage or a title company, and then they have four days to get it deposited. Again, we talked about that lenders don't love that. We've got to get all the documentation. We've got to get proof that it cleared their account. So the sooner the better. Here's an addendum.
Can I mention something? We had a little problem on earnest money. So if you're dealing with a property and the buyer is from out of the state, you can extend by an addendum the earnest money deposited 7 days after. There is not a problem with that as long as you have an addendum and disclose that and get the addendum signed from the beginning. So if you have a buyer from out of the state, I know with the wiring is easier, but if you have a broker who want to have an earnest money at his trust account, then you may want to consider to extend that 4 days to 7 days or 10 days, whatever your client abilities are to send you the earnest money.
That's great advice. If they're out of the country, maybe, and they won't be back before those 4 days, right? Anything could happen. Holidays and weekends do count. It's calendar days. So if you're, accepting an offer on a Thursday and then or it's the end of make sure you're watching that because your date of having it due could be a Sunday. And so you just want to make sure, and that's great advice that you can extend that. What happens if the earnest money check bounces?
Then it counts as not being in.
You need to let the seller agent know we did not. I don't know if I want to say I usually said we didn't receive the earnest money. I don't want to. So
that it bounced.
It's kind of a little touchy, unless if we already send a confirmation of the earnest money. I usually send it when the check is cleared. But if the check is not cleared, I rather say I will let the other agent know we did not receive the earnest money in our account yet.
Right. Well, or even the check, right? Because you're in breach if you haven't received the check in 4 days too.
Yes, but we can tell them we didn't because sometimes the check doesn't clear.
Sure.
We can say the earnest money did not clear in our account yet.
Oh, that's true because you have 4 more days. So yeah, you want to let the seller's agent know, and then you can again with an addendum. So now let's say that you didn't receive it within 4 days, or it didn't clear within the next 4 days. But then you can, basically the buyer's in breach, but you can remedy that with an addendum, right? Extending it. And so the best thing to do is to let both parties know. And again, we talked about that both the buyer and the seller's agent are responsible to make sure the earnest money is received in time. Okay. Let's see. I think we already talked about all of that stuff. And then you can read that right here, right? The earnest money, after acceptance, receipt of the earnest money by the brokerage. The brokerage shall have 4 calendar days. Sometimes we get confused about if it's calendar or business days, but it's calendar days. Okay? 4 calendar days for both things, so 8 total. Seller's disclosures. Just make sure your seller's disclosures are sent over in the correct time period so that, that can be a seller breach, but just make sure that they get them in enough time so that they should be something that you have immediately. And sometimes when my buyers don't get them in time, I'm like, the seller should have those when they do the listing, when the listing goes live. So that shouldn't be a problem getting those over. But make sure you're having that conversation with your seller's agent, like we talked about, making sure that they say everything that they need to say and that they've talked about all the things and that anything that's happened, water damage, any of those things is disclosed. So we've had a number of times where we find out that there was water damage in the house recently, surprisingly, when we go to get insurance for the house. And it states that there was a claim on the house and that the insurance is a lot higher on the property because there was a significant claim. And so some of those things can elevate your insurance premiums, even though you didn't have the claims, but the house had the claims. And when I dug into that a little bit, I'm like, that seems totally unfair, right? There's this new buyer who didn't have the claim and now their insurance is higher because of the claim. But basically the water damage, they're not sure how it was fixed. And so because there was a claim on it, they want to make sure that it was fixed properly and that they don't have another claim. So that's how we found out. And then again, that in that case, the buyers backed out because the sellers hadn't disclosed that there was a water leak and that they'd had a claim on it. And but if you disclose it, then the sellers can have the buyers can have, they know about it. They know that they can, that they might have that with insurance, and then they can have somebody in the second case where it didn't go out of contract when we found this out. They just had somebody come in and look over where the leak was and how it was fixed so that they were comfortable with the way that it was fixed and they were ready to proceed. So disclosure is almost always the best policy.
Can I add something?
Yes.
On your listings, get sure you get your title search on the same days you get your listings. Also get all the document from HOAs, because as a part of disclosure, you have to provide that to the buyer. Get sure you have all the documents so you send them all together, because part of the seller disclosure requirements are the HOA, the minutes, and so on and so forth. Or the best, you can just put it on the MLS so your life will be simplified.
That's really good advice. Karen also said make sure you have all the HOA stuff when you do a listing, but putting it on the MLS is really nice because then people can read through all the HOA requirements, where you can park your car, all that stuff, right? What do they call those? PCCD or something like that? I can't remember now. But all the HOA requirements, so people can read through those, and it saves you a lot of headache and time, especially because you don't want to go under contract and then have people reading those and then fall out of contract and disclosures over and over. So just giving everybody the information should be helpful. Bart says if they're an attachment to the MLS, thank you, same thing. Then they know all that and can be sent to the buyer's agent. Do they still need to be sent to the buyer's agent too after assessment? I guess you could, or you could just tell them they're linked to the MLS. You can go get them yourself. Kim, I want to know, sometimes agents think that all they need to provide is the SPCD, but they need to provide all that in paragraph 7 of the Rep C. Can you just go over that real quick for us?
Sorry, my husband had to unmute for me.
That's okay.
What John just mentioned is that you need to have the title or the title policy, right? Also the HOA documents. So seller disclosures is not just the SPCD. It's all of the paragraph 7.
Okay, thanks. So kind of the same thing John Shirley was saying. I appreciate that. Alan saying, what if the water damage was 20 years ago? Would that affect the insurance issues? So interestingly, I don't think so. I think they're more recent. But when we found this out through insurance, only some of the insurance companies will send back that there was water damage and it's elevated. And so we'll get one
It
estimate that
depends.
has it and one other estimate that doesn't. What? It depends. I know. That's our favorite thing to say. It depends. I know. You hate it. I hate it too. CCNRs. Thank you, Samuel. So yeah.
Also, Tim, I have one quick thing. You can, if your buyer's getting insurance, of course, on the property, part of his due diligence, he can call his insurance company and ask if there has been any claims filed on that property, because there is a national database that all insurance companies should be able to look at and see if any claims have been filed. You can then verify that with your SPCD. And so if they said nothing was done on the roof, but then there was a claim in the insurance database that was submitted, the seller did not provide accurate information. That's something I just recently went through with a listing that I have.
I mean, that's great advice, right? If you call your own insurance agency and ask them to run that report, the clue report Barbara's saying 5 to 7 years. So that's good to know those time frames. But even as a buyer, right, you could do the same thing when you're looking at properties if you want to. So as a lender, when I find that out, I immediately call my buyer's agent and just say, can you look at the seller's disclosures and just see if there was a leak? And in the case where they didn't cancel the contract, it was in the seller's disclosures and it said where it was so that they could take somebody in and have it looked at how it was fixed, which it ended up being that it was a rental property. These guys were buying, the new buyers were buying it as a primary, but it had been a rental property and one of the tenants' little kids had left the water on and it had run down. So they'd had a complete fix, but they were able to verify that and get the information from the sellers, and the sellers had already disclosed that, and then they were able to move forward. Okay. Due diligence. I'm not seeing any contracts. Hopefully you guys aren't either of waiving due diligence. I saw that during COVID. It was super scary. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing people pay over appraisal right now. I am seeing most contracts have seller concessions and quite a bit of it, but there are a few little pockets. I have one in Sandy where offering over asking, not over appraisal, but over asking, and escalation clause and no seller concessions to get the deal. So that still, those little pockets are still out there. It just depends on the property.
Was that one by the Waterford School?
I don't know that for sure. I know the address, but I don't know. Is that a school that's very like sought after?
I guess so. I was looking for a buyer and split levels were going over asking and over. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
I know. So there's this little area in Sandy where my buyer wants to live, and there's small houses, and like this one was listed. It's 3 bedroom, 1 bath, but it's 400,000, and so just that price point too, right? But multiple offers on some of those properties there. Let's see, what was this one? Yeah, so due diligence, be super careful that you have enough time. I'm always asking my buyer's agent, when is the inspection scheduled? Please get that inspection scheduled as soon as you go under contract so that I can order the appraisal and cancel it if there's some big problem and we're not charged for an appraisal fee. So I always like that inspection to happen really soon, find out if there's any major problems, and then ask for some concessions. And you can always ask for concessions after too, right? If you're in a really competitive price point or location or that, you can wait till after due diligence to ask for your concessions once you're under contract. So that's another strategy. I like this addendum. I don't always see this addendum used, but I love this addendum. And it's very succinct. It talks about, there's one thing in here like any closing costs prior. This is in addition. So we haven't had to get another addendum to clarify the purchase price because it says it in here. But you can do it however you want. You can have repairs. One thing I would really recommend when you're writing contracts, the 1.2 section, if you just always put in there anything in there left at no value, that will save you time later with the underwriters. Sometimes they ask for a 1.2 at no value addendum in addition to clarify. Sometimes they don't. It depends on what's left in that 1.2 section, like if it's a shed or trampolines or play places or things that are bigger like that, separate from the house, they'll usually ask for clarification. So it'll save you time and addendums if you just always get into the habit of putting in there whatever you put in there at no value. The second thing is, like, whenever you have after your after your inspection, you might have a list. You sit down with your buyers, you figure out what you're going to ask the sellers to do. Make a quick phone call to your lender once you decide what you're going to ask the sellers for, and just let them know and ask them, how does this affect my loan? How should I write this so that it doesn't cause any extra problems? We've had addendums come in where they don't do that, or they negotiate in the addendums back and forth, back and forth. It creates messes and problems with loans sometimes. Doesn't mean you can't write repairs in the addendum. If there's something you're absolutely not willing to do to buy the house with, it's not done, put it in an addendum, right? And talk to your lender about the consequences of that before you actually get that signed. But I like it when agents negotiate out of addendums, because then it's not as messy, right? So you don't have the back and forth. So we had one contract where one addendum said sellers to mitigate radon, sellers to cut back trees, sellers to fix concrete. The next addendum said sellers will not mitigate radon, but will give $3,000 or $1,800 or whatever in concessions. Now, what's the problem? I use this example a lot, so if you've been in some of my other classes, you've probably heard it, but what's the problem?
Underwriter gonna flag it.
Right, it's a safety issue, right? And so underwriters are going to say, well, we know there's a radon problem. Somebody's fixing this before this house can close. Okay. So just make sure that anything you put in there will be fixed before you close on the house, or else once it's in the addendum, we can't just take it out of the addendum without I mean, you can, right, if it's not something that the underwriter, but now the underwriter knows there's a problem. Another thing I've seen that causes problems in underwriting is if somebody says purchase to be purchase. So like, let's say the contract's for $575. Now the addendum says purchase price to be $550 because it needs a new roof. Now what happens if that's signed and that's in the contract? Now we can't close on the house unless we get a contractor out there that says the roof will last for a certain number of years and all sorts of problems. Whereas if it's not an appraisal condition, if in the addendum it just says purchase price to be $550, we don't have that problem. So just be careful when you're writing addendums. Talk to your lender about it until you get to the point where you understand all that. Number 4, John Troy's saying, number 4, due diligent condition. Upon acceptance of this addendum, buyer's objections to the due diligence shall be deemed resolved, and the due diligence condition is waived. So make sure there's nothing else you're going to want to ask when you sign and use this, because now it's resolved, right? When this is accepted and finished. Good point. Okay.
So those were keywords I put in there: due diligence and
Oh, you're
Repsy.
silly. Okay. I'm like, okay, well, we're there. We're at the end. Any other questions real quick? I'm going to end now because our time's up, but I'll stay on for any other questions. And John has been helping me with my keywords. Due diligence for number 4, and number 5 is Repsy. Okay, I really appreciate you guys coming. We didn't get through all my slides, but that happens sometimes. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate working with you. I appreciate how many wonderful agents I get to associate with. I appreciate you taking care of your clients. So if you work with me, my assistant will probably be reaching out just to see if you want to meet so that we can meet in person if I was the one that invited you. So look for that, and hopefully we can sit down for lunch and chat and work together. If there's any time that you need any questions answered, feel free to call me anytime. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Eden, could you stay on for a minute?
Yes, and I'm gonna put the code let me put this back up so that people can send
what I didn't hear any of the last 2 words.
I didn't hear the third one.
I only got the third one.
Okay, what's going on, you guys? I know you were here the whole time.
I didn't even.
I wrote them all down, but
I know.
3 more
I
hours
was
of
here the whole
education.
time and I missed 3, 4, and 5 too. I had to be
I
like,
missed
wait, what did I
3.
miss in that? And I have
Yeah.
them all here
I
if you
don't
want
re-
them.
Okay,
It's
sign is not, oh, look,
It's
somebody
number
put them
3.
all in the chat.
I think you should give them to them.
signs 3. It should
We're
be
listening.
mold, buyer, sign, due diligence,
Yeah,
and
mobile
Rep
buyer
C.
sign, due diligence, Rep C.
I know, it's funny
Okay,
because
sweet.
I don't know if I had a moderator from the state, what they'd say, but I try to be like super
They're all cheating.
politically correct. What?
They're all cheating.
I know. So, where's
I've been participating, so
you
I
have
don't know how I
been
could be cheating.
I am a moderator from the state undercover.
Oh no. Okay, now I'm gonna blame it on whoever put it in the chat. It wasn't me. I did not put it in the chat.
I took a class from you in October and I left immediately and I didn't process the words.
Oh
This was
no,
the
guy. Did we give you
yeah.
credit?
I didn't get credit yet. It was let's see what date. The 10th. No, the 8th. The 8th of October.
Oh no, you haven't gotten credit for it. You didn't send your words.
I didn't send the words and I didn't realize that I didn't send them. I
Okay,
always
send me an email because we can look up if you were how long you were on the class and then give it that way.
great. That's all I needed.
I have a
I'm in
question, Eden.
England.
You're in England?
I'm in England for a year and I'm keeping my stuff current. I'll be
Oh,
back
good.
in July and
Okay,
I'll
I won't
still have to do
remember,
it.
but if you send me an email with the information and the date of the class, I'll have my assistant look it up, and we did that for somebody else too.
Great. I think I have a couple more classes with you before my license is ready to renew in April.
Oh, good. I have a website if any of you are interested. I'll put it in the chat, www.utahce, no. Now I gotta look it up, really. www.utahcesource.com. So anyway, at the beginning of the year, I put Utah, all spelled out, cesource.com. Let's see if it comes up.
I have a question. This is my first time ever having to do continuing ed, and it's my second class. So do I just do that Google form, put the keywords in and submit it, and then like it's taken care of? I don't have to do anything else?
Yeah, so we'll send you out an email or a text that says we've banked your credit. And then it usually takes a few days, so he'll probably won't bank them till Monday. Actually, he's out of town, so I'll have another girl bank them on Monday. And then give it a couple days and then just double check that you had it. If for some reason you don't see your credits, then email me and we'll get it taken care of. That happens every once in a while.
Where do you check them at?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you guys know it changed recently? Can somebody from
Yeah,
Kind of
it's
called
tricky.
division.
it's tricky
It's a
sometimes.
Utah identification site, and that where you have your all your information for the board, and then you have to click on your name and
Utah
then
ID,
go
yeah. It's
to the. I'm
You
sorry,
click
what?
on your name?
yeah, it's the Utah ID site or something like that.
Yeah.
It's
Then
ridiculous.
then you, as you see your name, you go clear to the right and you click on a thing.
See.
I don't have it up in front of me, but if you get on your Utah ID site, that's where you
Yeah.
can find, and it tells you how to find it.
Yeah.
It tells you how
Okay,
many hours
thank you
you've
guys.
gotten and how many you need still to
Yeah,
process.
yeah. I think you select CE courses
Yes, correct.
is what you select. And then you
Okay, thank
select your
you.
license number and then it tells you what you got.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Eden.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for doing the class.
Yeah,
Sure.
good job.
Have a good weekend, you guys. Talk soon.
too.
Hopefully we can do a deal this year, right? We all want more deals.
We
Yeah.
all need it. Okay. Leave.